There we are. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. May your heart be bright. From now on, your troubles will be out of sight. That's just a little treat for the people watching this afterwards. Just waiting for people to come on in the chat. I don't actually expect many people to come on in the chat today. It's Christmas Eve, right? It's the 24th. Oh, I know, buddy. I know. I hate to break it to everybody. But if you are coming in here, glad to see you. This is going to be a pretty relaxed one, honestly. I'm gonna be pretty chill today. It's Friday, first of all, and then also Christmas Eve. So this is going to be the most fuckiest of the fucky. Fridays are fuck around days in the first place, and I think Christmas Eve itself is the most fucky of them all. Today's video, I did a video on the throttling that's going on of the left, which is getting pretty clear. And we're also starting to see this here, right? Trudeau, as reported by the Rational National, Trudeau makes a big admission.
During a recent interview, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau admitted that the left bothers him more than the right, which I find just incredible. So first here, this story from The Star. Justin Trudeau was attacked from the political left and right during this year's election campaign, but he says it was the casual cynicism of the left that bugged him the most. Quote, "To be honest, what hit me harder on a really personal level was not the anger and the anti-everything of the far right, so much as the casual cynicism of the left," Trudeau said during a lengthy interview on Monday.
Yeah. Justin Trudeau wears blackface, has given funding to neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine, right? Has outright said that he wants to create an NED-style organization, wants to create a mini NATO here in North America. He sees very clearly that, and the reason why the left bothers him more than the right, is that the right is just an expression of rage, and he can understand that, right? That he can understand why people would be angry given the complete and total inaction of his own administration, and he is aware of the inactions of his own administration and the fraudulent lying of his own administration. And the reason why he doesn't like the left and prefers neo-Nazis is because the left is articulating the abandonment, and he calls this casual cynicism, right? That the left is actually articulating like, hey, the liberals are abandoning us, right? And it's palpable, it's obvious, right? Like, homelessness is up, poverty is up, the housing crisis alone, right? Which has been caused by decades of inaction. Like, you don't end up with these sorts of crises just because, right? Like, these sorts of things have been coming down the pipe all along, and Trudeau is now outright and about a month ago he said straight out that he considers the far left and the far right to be equivalents to one another, when the far right is literally a group of people who are saying we should round up minorities and kill them, and the far left is saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't abandon people to poverty and starvation, right? Like, it's extremely telling. It's extremely telling that Justin Trudeau is saying these things. It's extremely telling that this is what's coming out of the highest level of our government structures, and we keep voting for it. Like, we keep voting for it. And because the Trudeau administration and the Liberals generally, and this is true of the Biden administration as well, because they view the left as a more considerable threat to their power than the right, the level of McCarthyism that's going to come our way over these next few years is going to be pretty high, I think. Like, the first stage of it is simply attempting to silence us. And that silence is going to come through deprioritization on the algorithm, right? They're going to try to do it as slipperily as they can, right? They're simply going to try to make us fade away. And it's getting kind of obvious that that's the strategy. I don't think it works. I think that the hunger for truth and the hunger for people to actually push back against these illegitimate power structures is going to overwhelm that strategy. And then it's going to get into just straight up McCarthy territory, right? That they'll just straight up shrug and be like, okay, communists are just as bad as fascists. We should start rounding them up, like we did in the past, right? Canada did that. Like, you could do a Google search of Tim Buck, right? You can find out the Canada has a long history of literally just arresting communists because they're communists, and incarcerating them. Like, this laughable idea that it's only communist countries that have done these sorts of things where they've rounded up political opposition, even though that narrative itself is pretty nuanced and more complex. When, like, literally, like, under Bennett, we arrested 8 communists, Tim Buck included. They stayed in prison for a good period of time. Like, the level of disruption that the communists have experienced is pretty high. And then to the point where you have, like, throughout the 80s and early 90s, outright infiltration of communist parties with the intention to dissolve them from the inside out, which was successful to various degrees. And just now, the communist parties here in Canada are beginning to find their feet again and actually build a base. And so, sure as shooting. You wait, right? They'll just find an excuse to round up communist leaders. They'll just find an excuse to arrest these people, claiming that what they're doing is the same as, like, the Proud Boys or, like, neo-fascists on the far right or anything like that, right? Like, these I've been saying it all along, right? There will be a moment where they will just simply rule openly, right? Oh, do our history of forced sterilization next. Yeah. First, good to see you, Grinning. Good to see you, bud. Merry Christmas to you. And I mean, for God's sakes, the forced sterilizations were happening in California as late as, like, 1995. Like, I mean, like, we have accused China of doing forced sterilization, an accusation that we have dropped because it's so incredulous and without evidence whatsoever. And it's so incredulous that it actually discredits the people who are saying it. And so they want to try to maintain their assets, and so they've stopped with the sterilization rift, so that they can use those same people in other lies, like the Uyghur genocide lie, for example, which I've got a great, I found something really great on that recently, where, yeah, the world's oldest person ever was a Uyghur, right? World's oldest person ever has died at the age of 135. Real genocide going on there, eh? Right? Real genocide. Oldest person in the world is a Uyghur. Super huge genocide, right? Yeah, that kind of history is too inconvenient to be taught to white Christians. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into the Christianity thing, man, like, I'm like, American Christians are the epitome of that sort of Voltaire phrase of, if you can convince people to believe absurdities, you can convince them to commit atrocities. Like, really think about the narrative that's coming out of the Anglo-Christian far right, and it really is just insanity layered in insanity. And these Christian institutions are completely fraudulent. Like they don't give a shit about Christ at all. Like there's a reason why they keep quoting from the Old Testament, right? Like these guys that are trying to use the Old Testament as the basis for creating laws in the modern period are heretical to their own faith, right? Like the whole narrative of Christ's death and resurrection was that the Christians were making a new testament, right? They were making a new deal, right, with between man and God, and through Christ's death and resurrection, he is the fulfillment of the old law. And the Christians put forward the idea that the Old Testament stands as a excellent source of history and full of poetry and all of this, but in terms of its legal basis in our lives, we no longer need to follow it. And the New Testament is littered with these sorts of arguments and littered with this kind of idea that we need to move into a new testament and a new connection with God through the figure Jesus Christ. And what these modern Republican far-right Christians are saying by espousing the Old Testament as something that needs to be followed to the letter is that they are fundamentally saying that the death and resurrection of Christ was meaningless. And in that way, they are heretics to their own faith. Like, they are espousing a doctrine that says that Jesus Christ's sacrifice, he sacrificed himself for our sins and then was resurrected and ascended to heaven, right? That all of that was meaningless, and that we should instead venerate the book of Deuteronomy and Leviticus as holy books, right? So in no way are these guys Christians at all. They call themselves Christians, but like they're fake. They're completely fake. Like the whole history of Christianity, the entire the 2,000-year history of Christianity gets obliterated by these guys, and they just don't care at all about even their own faith. And I'm not sitting here saying like any of this is valid on the face of it. I'm just saying that that's their faith. Like that's what they believe. That's what they have espoused. And they're complete frauds, even within their own rule set. And, like, shouldn't be surprised at all, right? Like, greed and power has just overwhelmed our senses. It's overwhelmed everything. So, all right. I say we move on to the day's number pick. I'm going with a 3. I'm feeling 3 today. Let's see what we can get.
Here we go for today's number.
Here we go, today's number.
It's December 24, 2021. 10 balls.
10 balls.
Each ball has a number.
Are you in for this,
Numbers
Grinning? Come
1
on.
through
You got to be
10.
in for this. We got an 8 from Grinning, 2 from Ezial. Good to see you,
Swirl the
Ezial.
numbers.
Merry Christmas to you, bud. Here we go. Swirl the numbers.
Pick a number.
Harry in with a 9. Good to see you. Merry Christmas, Harry.
Today's number is
What do we got?
7.
7. If Mox comes in, he's the winner. Mox going to be in with a 7. Ah, man. Okay. Well, as I have been doing on the channel, this means that I play a song. And it's a 7. Let's see what song are we going to get. What song are we going to get? Oh yeah, that's a fun one. Hey Eric, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Yeah, long time no see. That's how it is. Life takes us away, whisks us away from one another. You're coming in just in time for the song. This is a song I really like, actually. Where's my pick? There we go. There we go. All right. Suited psychos sold a package of lies, spun their stories and promised the skies. Now they're robbing us in front of our eyes. They get off watching your children die. And the ghouls who claim to run this place, they don't know wrong from right. They're trying to kill the human race. I won't go down without a fight. Raise the banners, take up the cause. Suicidal nations don't have any laws. Lift up your heads and take out your claws. Watch what happens when your apathy thaws. 'Cause the ghouls who claim to run this place, they don't know wrong from right. They're trying to kill the human race. I won't go down without a fight. Kill these fascists, break all their bones. Take everything away, don't leave them alone. Bury them beneath a mountain of stone. They're evil, we won't forgive or condone. 'Cause the ghouls who claim to run this place, they don't know wrong from right. They're trying to kill the human race. I won't go down without a fight. Won't go down without a fight. That song kicks ass, dude. I give my performance of it like a C+. C+. I'm having kind of a sleepy. It's Christmas. It's winter. But that's a kick-ass tune, dude. That's a kick-ass tune. If I went and played that live and somebody was like, boo, I'd be like, get fucked, you loser. Get the fuck out of here. Fucking neoliberal bullshit. Merry boycotted Christmas. Yeah, exactly, as y'all. That's the way to roll. I've been extremely busy, and lately I've been researching a lot about Nazi Germany. Slowly created a thesis where I'm going to show how fascists evolved and became a libertarian movement. I'm planning, to write this thesis for a PhD in political science. Already have the title for the thesis, How Fascists Lost the Battle But Won the War. Yeah, I think you're onto it, Eric. Like, fascism won World War II. Like, absolutely. Like, I don't think you can argue that, right? Like, sure, the Nazis got beat up, but like, fascism won for sure. Like a core victory, like a major victory for fascism. That like, America essentially becomes a fascist country post World War II if it like. And this flows into something I've been saying all the time, Eric, which is like, I don't understand the difference. Like, what is actually the difference between fascism and capitalism? Like, it seems to me like every time anybody writes about fascism, they begin with the presumption that fascism and capitalism are different. That there was this group called the fascists, right? And there's this group called the capitalists, and that these groups are actually different from one another. And I just don't see it. Like, I just don't see it. Anytime anybody tries to create a delineation between these two, it just sounds like they're explaining capitalism to me. So, I actually feel like we could start making the work that's been done on fascism is good work. Like, it is. It's good work. But, like, they begin with this statement that fascism and capitalism are somehow different from one another. And I'd be very interested to see somebody writing from the position that says, no, capitalism and fascism are not different from one another. And that when these guys are actually talking about fascism, they are talking about capitalism. And, like, they're talking about, like, and they're not, like, my view of it is that they're not even talking about, like, capitalism, and then there's, like, this other subsect called fascism. That, like, capitalism has always and continuously operates under fascist principles. Always. Right? Just because it's not destroying and invading you currently doesn't make it less fascist. Like, do you think that the Afghani people think that there's a distinguishing feature between capitalism and fascism? Or do you think they're walking around being like, well, at least we were invaded by capitalists and not fascists, right? Like, do you think that the people of Iraq think that way? Do you think when Somalia gets bombed or Syria gets bombed, they're like, oh, thank God these are capitalist bombs and not fascist bombs? I just don't... Yeah, there really isn't any difference since there was tons of privatization and conservatism during fascism. Yeah, and near as I can tell, the term fascism exists. Like, first of all, it was the party of Mussolini. It was the Fascimi party, right? And the term fascist starts to get used by capitalists in order to somehow distinguish other groups of capitalists from them. And in a way, it gets used as a shield. It's a way for capitalists to pretend as though, oh, those guys are fascists. We're good guys. We're capitalists. We fight the good fight as capitalists who need to fight against fascists, right? And near as I can tell, it really is as simple as if it's your country destroying a foreign power, it's capitalism. But if it's a foreign power destroying your country, it's fascism. Like, that seems to be the like, if the victims are white, it's fascism. If the victims are brown, it's capitalism. Seems to be very kind of clear cut. Even Ludwig von Mises was an Austrian fascist and wrote that fascism saved Europe from communism. Oh yeah, this overwhelming fear of communism has allowed. Like, here's a fellow by the name of Jesse Kelly. Apparently, he has 350,000 followers. Right? The left calls you fascist because the left fears fascism. I mean, we do, because, like, concentration camps and shit. Sadly, the monstrous fascist dictators were the most historically successful at stopping communism, which they failed to do even that, right? The communists defeated the Nazis. Like, the communists defeated the fascists, like, in World War II. Every single time the fascists and the communists have fought, the communists have won. That the only time that the fascists can claim any victories over the communists is when they round them up in their own societies and throw them into concentration camps. Like, when it comes to full-scale war and requiring productivity, where the two different economic styles fight against one another, the fascists lose every single time. They lose every single time. I wish it wasn't so. I worry about what that means for our future. Yeah, a future where everybody's taken care of, homelessness is eradicated, you don't have student loan debt. Real tough future for Jesse Kelly here. Know what the left doesn't fear? Conservatism. They hate it because it's the opposite of leftism, but they don't fear it because they know conservatism cannot defeat leftism. Again, I wish it wasn't so. Not that fascism has a good track record either. Conservatism is the opposite of leftism, but it cannot defeat leftism because there is not a laissez-faire way to defeat communism. It must be aggressively purged or it festers and spreads like any other infection. This last statement here, right, and I'm an anti-communist, of course, it must be aggressively purged or it festers and spread like any other infection. Like, that's straight up McCarthyism. That's the justification they used for the Vietnam War, the justification they used for the Cambodian War, the war against Laos, right? Like we have to purge and destroy communism at the root, right? It has allowed the American empire to commit multiple atrocities, including the McCarthy period where they outright blacklisted communist people from industries. Like, are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Like, and all this shit's coming back. Like, it's coming our way, right? We're not capable of learning. Like, our society doesn't learn, right? So we're going to have to go through it again. And as we go through it, we really should just jump to the end of it, where we're telling these people, like, what they're doing is an affront. Like, so much for freedom of speech, right? So much for any of this kind of stuff. Like, and it's pretty despicable, and it's going to be fairly despicable. Like, what YouTube is doing with its algorithm engineering is already fairly despicable, frankly. Like, at least the McCarthyans were doing it out in public, right? At least they were, like, outright rounding people up and hauling them in front of Congress and all this kind of stuff. Like, what YouTube is doing is just this insidious, like, backwards dealing where, like, if you're a leftist, you're just deprioritized completely. You're never going to be part of the conversation because we're simply not going to show you, right? And you're seeing this story, like, there's a Dan Price, who is this famous he's a CEO for a credit card company who created a minimum wage in his company of, I think it was like $75,000. Like, it was pretty enormous. Like, everybody in his company gets this enormous, like, well above the median of a wage. And when he did it, everybody made fun of him for it, right? He made international headlines and everybody made fun of him. And then now it's been like a complete resounding success for him, right? Why? And why? Well, it turns out if you pay people a decent wage, they work hard for you, right? It turns out that if you show them that you actually, if you actually care, right? If you actually care about them and you actually want to help them, then they're going to turn around and do the same for you. Big fucking surprise, right? And it's been like a resounding success, right? A resounding success for his company. Like, Harvard Economics is doing like a case study because, like, you know, Harvard is essentially economically illiterate, and so they're looking at this being like, wow, this is how strange. We have to do a study of this, right? And literally it's like, oh, just read the works of Marx for a minute and you'll see what's going on. But okay. So they've got to, like, reinvent the wheel to figure out what's going on with Dan Price. But the response, so then Dan Price now has ascended to a certain level of fame, and now he and now he goes to Twitter and is very critical of capitalist systems, specifically neoliberal capitalist systems, right? He himself is still a capitalist. And but now Twitter is not spreading his tweets around to people who are not his direct subscribers. So the only way that you can see what Dan Price says ever on Twitter is if you are already his subscriber. So, like, they're literally censoring him. Like, they're not showing him to other people. David Dole said a very similar thing, right? Like, he showed straight up, like, yeah, they're only showing my content to my subscribers. That they're not showing my content to people who are not subscribed to me. It's pretty despicable what YouTube is doing. Like, it's fairly disgusting, and we should insist that there is an equality that is created, that people should simply not be deprioritized simply because they are ruddering up against the political system. Like, I mean, it's neo-McCarthyism and it's in our face. It's getting obvious. Hey, Dan, how you doing? I have a 508. 508 what, bud? Andrew, how you doing, bud? Finally free from pizza slavery for 2 days. Merry Christmas to you too, Andrew. Merry Christmas to you, bud. Yeah, I think it was more like 70K, yeah, but still. Yeah, my only issue with Dan Price, he doesn't give direct control to his workers. He's still the boss. Yeah, he's still a capitalist, right? He's still a capitalist. He is essentially Oh, why am I blanking on that? Oh, that's so embarrassing. The New Deal was based on Keynesian economics. He's essentially a Keynesian, right? He's essentially a Keynesian. Oh, Dan, you've got 508 followers? Good for you, bud. You should get them all over here. Get them all over here. Tell them I exist. Because that's the only way this channel is going to grow anymore. Like, I've already concluded that this is the truth. The only way this channel is going to grow, the only way it's actually going to get past the 1,000 subscriber mark, and the 1,000 subscriber mark is the big deal for this channel. Like, this channel really starts to kick off at 1,000. And so it makes sense that they're throttling it now when I'm at about 800, right? Like, because they don't want me to hit 1,000, because then they've got to find a justification for why they're going to censor me, right? And they don't want to have to outright censor people. Every single time they outright censor someone, it makes big headlines. Like, people are really, really sensitive to that. And yeah, I find it hilarious the right thinks they're being censored, and yet studies show the exact opposite. Yeah, but since when have the right lived in reality? Like, since when? Like, these guys literally believe that a wizard is coming back any moment. Like, that there's a wizard coming back from space that's going to come down and separate the good from the bad. The good, of course, being white, white supremacists, and the bad being the people that they're already bombing, right? And if you've got these sorts of belief systems, then you don't need to care about things like climate change, right? Like, you don't need to care about the destruction of the species or any of that, because that's just a continuation into the end times, right? And the end times are great because Jesus Christ comes back at any moment, right? Like, this is what they think. This is how they think. And we're seeing more and more how dangerous that is. Because if you believe that, you can believe anything. You can believe literally anything, right? You can believe that Q was Donald Trump telling people what was actually going on through secret code, like all this kind of stuff. Just letting you know, I'm a Christian anarchist. Well, I mean, are you with an institution, Eric? Because, like, my position, like, my background is Christianity, but, like, I don't see any institution that is acting in any way that I would even begin calling Christian. Like, I can't think of a single one, right? Like, at this stage in the game, like, what you have is far-right lunatics who are heretical by their own faith and are literally just using the Christian faith as a way to sucker rubes into giving them tons of money. Like, this is your, like, Joel Orstein's or your Pat Robinsons, right? Just people who are creating, like, little cult followings because of the desperation and poverty in the society, which they vote for and they completely vote to support. I am LDS. I don't know what LDS stands for. And then the people on the left are basically just burying their heads in the sand and just hoping that it all blows over and that they'll be left alone, while simultaneously voting, like, for liberals who maintain the system of poverty that their Christ told them to fight against, right? Like, none of these institutions are valid or have any credibility whatsoever. Oh, Mormon. Yeah, I've got Mormons in my family too, Eric. Latter-day Saint, of course. Yeah, I should have put that together. The Mormons at least have some kind of understanding that it's about community, right? That it's about building each other up, and it's about having, like, a formal community with one another. So they've got that, which I think is ahead of everybody else. Like all of the Protestant shit is just garbage. Like, it's all trash. Like, the Baptists and the Unitarians and, like, all this kind of stuff. It's just, like, let's vote for conservatives and liberals to maintain the system of poverty, and then pretend as though our, like, insignificant, tiny little nods to the idea that we're going to help the poor actually matter, when in reality what we do is we take money from people who take money from people who are, they want to help, right? Maybe they'd like to vote even left of the liberals. And so we take money from them, and then we do, like, a barbecue, right? And then we do, like, a barbecue on Thursdays or whatever and pretend like we care about the poor, and then continue to vote for conservative and liberal, right? This is the system. The reason why all of these institutions are completely fraudulent is because they vote to support the system of poverty, and then benefit from the existence of that system, right? And I don't care who you are. I don't care, Anglican. I don't care. All of them do this, right? The only institution, the only religious institution that I would speak any differently of is the ones that take to the street in protest against it. So that's like Martin Luther King, right? Like people who are actually getting in the streets, organizing protests, saying outright of the system, that the system itself has festered. But I don't see it. So as far as I'm concerned, they're all fraudulent. And they're fraudulent for slightly different reasons, but it's the same, right? They all vote to maintain the system of poverty, and then they benefit from it, right? Just like Christ wanted them to, right? Grinning, you're a former full-time pastor, Pentecostal, now atheist. Well, I'm not. Wow, that's a pretty big jump, dude. That's a pretty big jump. Although I understand why, like Pentecostal, like there's not, at the end of the day, there's not much there. Like it's a pretty big blowback, but until you get exiled, then you're cut off. Just found out your sister's gonna have another kid. Well, with the sad face. Uh-oh, is this not good news? Is this not good news, Onward? Merry Christmas to you, by the way, Onward. I don't know if I said. You kind of snuck in with the hoot hoot. Hoot hoot. Yeah, but I'll stand with anyone against imperialism and capitalism. Well, yeah, because, like, capitalism is the ultimate rot, right? It's the reason why all of these religious institutions have completely lost any basic connection to anything resembling spiritual or existential or religious thought, because they've been completely overwhelmed by the death cult ideology, right? Like, sacrifice everything for profit. And even the churches have to do it. Like, even the churches have to do it. Like, nobody is free from it. And so everyone has to capitulate and concede. And when it comes to the churches, like, they're fine with maintaining the system, right? And, like, the worst of them being the Catholics, right? Like, at least the heretical far-right lunatics in America aren't also pedophiles, as far as we know. I have a mixed feeling with the church. There are things I agree with the church, but politically, I have huge issue with the church, such as the priesthood ban, the conservative mindset. But doctrinally, I can argue all day that they got it right. The thing I find interesting is the greatest Christian were always socialist. Yeah, exactly, because they were the ones that got to the streets, right? They were the ones that actually took the message of Christ and brought it where it was supposed to be, which was in the streets, right? The reason that the Christian churches in North America are completely fraudulent is because they're just cooperating with this capitalist death cult, right? And they're doing it to benefit themselves. Very straightforwardly. Like, they don't read their own books. Like, they don't care about Christ or Christianity or any of that kind of stuff. Like, to an individual, like, they don't care. If they did, not only would they stop voting conservative and liberal, not only would they tell people to stop voting conservative and liberal, they would already be in the streets. Like, why is it guys like me? Why is it people like me that are having to take to the streets? Like, why is this not already an enormous church-funded, church-based push to get out into the streets to address the significant abandonment that is obvious, that you can see with your eyes? And the only reason they don't do it is because they benefit from these systems, right? That's the structure of it now. Yeah, in fact, the only reason I'm a socialist is because of my Christian faith, and it baffles me why Christian faith fight against social, because they're not Christians. They're not. They're just in a club, right? The club has been overwhelmed by capitalism and the capitalist death cult, right? With its death cult ideology. And it's linked in very closely to this, that instead of focusing on what Christ said and what Christ did, they focus on, like, the mythology. The instead of actually treating Christ like a teacher and a leader, they treat Christ like just an icon, right? He's just a guy that you just bow your head to, right? Especially the white Christ, right? And Merry Christmas. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, President Trump. Oh, is that supposed to be President Trump? For letting us say Merry Christmas again. The church helped feudal lords stay in power, yeah, and organized religion. My sister and her husband have one daughter, barely surviving. I don't understand having another. And I'm supposed to pretend it's great. Yeah. Yeah, dude, I don't get it. I don't get it either, honestly. Like, I have friends that have, like, they have a kid, like, maybe two, and I, like, go and spend some time with them, and, like, it's really obvious that they're barely keeping their shit together. Like, it's really, really obvious. And they're, like, well established. Like, they're like, doctors and lawyers and librarians and shit. And it's like, okay. But, like, when I hang out with you, you guys seem like you're losing your fucking minds. Like, the whole time. Like, the whole fucking time. Like, this next generation of kids that are coming up are literally going to have been raised by, like, frantic, scattered... completely like unable to even be present in basic aspects of their life. Like the kids that are coming up now are just gonna be like totally. I don't know how they're not gonna be ridden with like anxiety and depression just from the outset, like right away. Yeah, Christians largely do what they're told. Yeah, it's sort of like you don't do your own dental work, you don't do your own spiritual work, you just delegate it. Yeah. Yeah, like as if you can delegate spiritual work, right? Like that's what's fun about spiritual work is it's your work. Like it's for you. You have to do it. No one else can do it. Only you can do it. And yet we're just like we just kind of subserviate it. We just sort of throw it off to the wayside and say like, "Oh, but I love Christ." And so it's totally fine. So moving on to this. This is an article that comes out of the Globe and Mail. So here's the strategy of the death cult, right? They know they're losing the basic income conversation. They know they're losing it because it's so obvious, right? Like literally people are starting to point out that like you guys just gave like $100 billion to corporations. $100 billion for a basic income would actually be better for the economy. Like what's like you guys give $100 billion so we can offshore that money. And instead, we could give $100 billion to citizens and actually let them have food and shelter. Like, what's the problem here? And they know the conversation is beginning. They're beginning to lose the conversation, and they're beginning to lose the conversation because you're starting to see the NDP, Leah, I forget her last name, but an NDP MP just put forward a bill, saying, "Hey, we should have a basic income." And the Liberals are going to vote it down, right? Because that's how Liberals do. But the problem is that even like people who vote Liberals want to see a basic income. Like the basic income is popular in the Liberal Party itself. Like sometimes they poll people in the Liberal Party and they get numbers as high as 90% support, right? The support for a basic income in the Liberal Party is actually higher than in the NDP, right? Like, and that's been statistically consistent. And so the question that even Liberals are beginning to ask is like, hey, how come we can't put this in? And it's starting to get fucking absurd, right? Like we passed the CERB in less than a week. Like it was an emergency, it was a crisis, and we did it, and it was easy to do, and now these Liberals are turning around and dismantling it as quickly as they can. And so even their own base is beginning to be like, hey, why is this so hard? Like what is going on? And they are beginning to lose support over it. Like what happened in the last election was actually a huge loss for the Liberals. Traditionally, when Liberals call a snap election like this, they actually do seize their majority. Chrétien did it. Pierre Elliott Trudeau did it, right? Traditionally, when Liberals do that kind of thing, they end up with the majority, and they didn't, right? That's a huge loss for them. It's an enormous loss. Should be an enormous wake-up call for them. And it does look like the Liberals are beginning to react, at least in terms of their performativeness, right? That let's take a well-established environmentalist and put him as the minister of environmentalism. Not that we're actually going to do anything, but that's good performative action, right? That shows that will show people that we're serious when we're not, right? They got to look like they're helping when they're doing nothing, exactly. And so now the new strategy is, okay, we are going to implement the basic income. That's probably going to happen. You've got the Globe and Mail publishing articles, right? It's time for Ottawa to seriously study how a basic income could replace outdated layers of sclerotic support programs. So the new strategy is, okay, we'll give you a basic income, but we'll privatize everything and force you to buy everything from us. That's the end game strategy for these psychopaths, right? That, okay, fine, we'll put in the basic income, but we'll eliminate all forms of government-funded programs so that you have to, in like a laissez-faire market-based system, buy everything from the psychopath class, which of course will jack rates and do everything they can, right? Because they're psychopaths, that's what they do. Out of curiosity, if we do get a UBI, do you advocate to abolish the welfare state? That's what the fascist economists like Milton Friedman's goal with his idea with UBI, since it came from him. No, we should just have both. Like, we literally should have both. Like, you should have robust welfare systems that exist in order to deal with these problems. And then we should also have a basic income. And guess what? All of the studies that we have done so far show that that is how you build an economy, right? That people who do these sorts of things end up in better positions, and you end up with a stronger economy. But the illiterates that are actually at the highest level of our society right now, like, they genuinely believe that the way to build an economy is to destroy the economy. Like, literally. Like, that's what Austerian economics is, right? You're literally saying out loud in front of everyone, we are going to destroy the economy, and that will create a stronger economy. That is their argument. And it's incoherent, it's nonsensical, because it's based on this idea, like this completely fraudulent religious ideology that capitalism somehow creates jobs somehow. Whereas, like, no, the stronger economies are the ones where, like, the state guarantees the security of the structure and offers the goods or the service at the lowest possible rate, free of parasites, which are capitalists. And so it's this argument, and you can see now, right? It's coming out of the Globe and Mail, which is owned by David Thompson, the wealthiest Canadian, right? Who is clearly a psychopath. And they just want us to be beholden to the market, right? It's just another way to entrench wage slavery, right? That, oh, sure, we'll create a system where you won't, like, starve to death on the streets, but you'll always have to sell yourself to a market. You'll always have to sell yourself to the labor market, which is owned by who? The billionaire class, right? A private member's bill advancing a guaranteed basic income for Canadians has no hope of passage, but it contains a good idea that the Liberal government should steal. Bill C-223, introduced in the House of Commons by NDP MP Leah Gazin last week, would direct the Minister of Finance to develop a national framework for the implementation of a guaranteed livable basic income throughout Canada for any person over the age of 17. Within a year of the bill's passage, the minister would be required to present a framework for a basic income to Parliament and then regularly report on progress in implementing the framework. The fact that people are poor in this country is a political choice, Ms. Gatson told me. Let's stop propping up corporations and let's invest in people. The interesting thing about a guaranteed basic income is that its aspects of it are attractive to conservatives as well as progressives, because it could put an end to the massive bureaucracies and complexities of the welfare state. Not only would a guaranteed basic income reduce poverty, it would increase independence and responsibility. Just so you know, independence and responsibility is steadily becoming fascist buzzwords for wage slavery, right? You should be independent and responsible for yourself in a wage slave structure. That's the argument. That you should be clean, show up on time, be responsible, work hard for your owners. That is what is being argued. Straight up. Most private member bills die on the order paper, and C223 will as well. But the possibility of Canada adopting a guaranteed basic income deserves more robust study. Embarrassingly, like, the basic income has steadily become like one of the most well-studied policies, maybe in the history of the nation, right? There have been pilot project after pilot project after pilot project with predictable outcomes that you literally now can predict the outcomes, that and all of the nonsense that people will work less and all that kind of stuff, it just fails. Like, it doesn't work that way. Those claims aren't borne out when you do, science and research. And of course he says it here, right? This is not to say research does not exist. There have been pilot programs and reports by both governments and think tanks. Earlier this year, the Parliamentary Budget Office produced a report showing that a guaranteed income of about $17,000 for a single person and $24,000 for a couple would cut poverty rates by almost half in 2022, although this would vary across provinces. Yeah, the PBO put the annual cost to government at $93 billion by 2026. So $93 billion is one of those big numbers that say, oh my God, it's so huge. The cost of our systems currently, right? The cost of our systems currently is likely twice that amount. The Basic Income Canada Network, a nonprofit, has studied 3 scenarios. The stripped down version would offer a maximum of $22,000 to a single adult and just over $31,000 to a couple, and it would cost the federal and provincial governments $134 billion annually. And note how they're using the word cost here as if it's like sunk costs, right? Like, why not use the word invest, right? Like, we literally are just absconding the language of how government actually works, right? It's not a cost, right? Like, the government literally can create the money, distribute the money, and then through a system of taxation, retrieve the money in order to balance out the currency to ensure there isn't inflation. Like, it can literally do that today with like a one-pager, right? Remember, the CERB was passed in fucking a week, right? They had it ready to go. They know how to do it. They know what to do. They're just not doing it, right? For obvious reasons, because they're psychopaths. It would be fully paid for by increasing federal income tax rates. I mean, that's okay. The highest bracket would go from 33% to 37%, increasing corporate taxes from 15 to 20%, taxing capital gains at the same level as income, and dismantling many existing welfare programs. There are certain programs that you can actually like cleanly get rid of. Like, there's no reason to have both a basic income and employment insurance, for example, right? Like, those two programs are overlapping. And I think that's reasonable, that you could create that case. Such heavy increases in taxation could deter investment and lead to higher unemployment, resulting in blah, 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 neoliberal garbage, right? Such heavy increases in taxation could deter investment. Never happens. They're literally arguing that because a corporation is going to experience a 5% increase in taxes, that they are going to leave the country and no longer be part of the country. So taking their profits to zero. So because they're going to experience 5% less profits, they're going to accept zero profits. It's incoherent and nonsense, and the fact that it's even being written down uncritically without anybody actually pointing that out is fucking journalistic malpractice. This shit shouldn't even be published. Like, it's trash on the face of it. It's trash on the face of it. You've got to be a complete and total rube to believe this exists, right? Like, in basic sense, it's basic. Like, Walmart isn't going to suddenly leave. And even if they did, you're telling me no one in the country is going to be like, oh, there's like a big giant vacuous hole in the market. Holy shit. I can make millions and millions and millions of dollars. Right? Like, yeah, they're going to fucking do it. Like, it's embarrassing to make the claim otherwise. It's just an embarrassment. Like this guy here, in my view, John Ibbotson, he discredits himself with that statement. Like, he's no longer a trustworthy source of information by saying simply that. Like, it's embarrassing. Anyway, moving on. And all of this presupposes some sort of asymmetric agreement could be reached between Ottawa and the provinces, tailored to regional realities of the fiscal capacity of each province. Can you imagine a premier saying no? What would happen to the political career of a premier that says no to this? What do you think? No, I don't want the citizens of my country to have access to a basic income. What do you think happens? And here is where we could take inspiration from Mrs. Gadsden's bill. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland could commission a task force on the costs and benefits of a guaranteed income, which they've already done. You literally cite the PBO report. We've already done that, so what's the point? The task force could be led by an outside authority or by senior officials in the department, like the Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister Budgetary Office. There would have to be plenty of outreach to provincial and Indigenous governments and extensive modeling of economic impacts. Like, literally, they're getting to the point now where they're like, we have to have a test that's so vast that everybody gets it, but it's got to be a test, and until we test it that way, we can't actually implement it. It is getting to be that way. Whereas this like circular argument of like, no, we can't pass the basic income because we haven't done a full-scale test, and we won't do a full-scale test of it because it's never been tested, and so that's why we'll never pass basic income, right? Like, it's just like little circle. The result, if successful, would be Canada's first gold-plated, fully costed, impact-projected framework for a federal, provincial guaranteed basic income. I'd allow the department 18 months to pull it all together. Like, they passed the CERB in a week. The framework might be so unrealistic and expensive that it proves the guaranteed basic income won't work. Like, literally, you can see this guy crossing his fingers and just being like, come on, we got to kill this thing. We need wage slaves in the society, guys. We need wage slaves. The whole system of capitalist coercion is based on the idea that we have wage slavery in the society. Come on. More likely, it would be embraced by one ideological side and rejected by the other. Yeah, psychopaths will reject it, and reasonable people who understand that homelessness shouldn't exist in the society at all will embrace it. It's fairly straightforward. Those on the left might abandon the idea once they see the full impact of removing tens of billions of dollars in unemployment insurance, social assistance, and other income supports from people who now would be expected. And this is just assumed, right? We're just assuming that we're going to be doing that, right? Like, we're just assuming that we're going to be doing that. No. Like, this is the reason we need to get rid of these capitalists, right? The capitalists need to be chased out of the system because they're psychos, right? Even as we're attempting to do nice things, they're trying to find ways to hurt the populace while saying like, well, how are you going to pay for that? Literally, money doesn't exist. Shut the fuck up. And honestly, how are we going to pay for it? By getting rid of you psychos. Like, real straightforward shit. Fucking loser psychopaths. Those on the right might protest confiscatory taxation. Yeah, who cares? A loss of competitiveness, a joke, a total joke. There's no such thing. Doesn't exist. And the inevitability of new social programs being layered on top of the basic income. Yeah, they complain about people being helped because they're psychos. Like, fairly well established at this point. But the existing system, which was put together more than a half century ago, with layer upon layer added since, is so complex and sclerotic that meaningful reform is probably impossible. Maybe it's time to replace the whole thing with a simple guaranteed income for anyone who needs it. Let's at least take a good, hard look. Right? Like, this dude is just like a white man who doesn't have a concern in the world, publishing these hack articles for a billionaire, pretending as though, like, yeah, there's no homelessness in the society. The fact that homelessness is not being treated as a crisis, as a failure of policy, and as a failure of the society is staggering to me. It's absolutely staggering. The fact that there is even a single homeless person, like, this involves military level intervention. That's what it does. Hey Vince, hey Just JC, how you doing? Merry ho ho to you too. Good to see you, Major. And they'll call it inflation when prices rise. Yeah, and new studies are coming out showing that the price rises are not inflationary. That they're just raising the prices and saying that it's inflation. Right? Like, the corporations are just raising prices, claiming that it's inflation. Like, these guys are psychopaths. Like, there is no lie they will not tell. Happy holidays to you all. The year 2021, Zhush 110 is coming to an end. I can't wait till we get Christmasism, where everyone gets UBI every month for life and a little extra for the holidays. Wouldn't that be nice, no? Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. I just don't understand why... I just don't see why we're accepting a worse life for ourselves. Like, that's the kind of the most baffling part. We're just, like, accepting that life should be shitty, right? And if you stand up and say, hey, maybe life shouldn't be shitty, everybody loses their mind. Like, I feel like the things that we're suggesting are actually quite straightforward and reasonable. But not according to Justin Trudeau. According to Justin Trudeau, the people on the left are the real problems. It's not the neo-Nazis that are the problems, the people he funds. It's the people on the left. So since tax is dynamic, when I can't get taxed because I make nothing, and the rich don't pay taxes because they hide it, how does the government get tax revenue? By taxing away the middle class. That's how they do it. Yeah, oh well, bye. Gotta make up those profits. Exactly, gotta make up those profits. Yeah. Like, and in the end, like, something's gotta give, right? Like, the model falls apart. Like, it breaks apart of its own design. And, like, I can't overstate how serious the problem we're facing is as a people. That, like, as the system falls apart, the very people who are in positions of power and authority are claiming that everything's hunky-dory. And the reason why they're claiming everything is hunky-dory isn't simply because they're evil, like, lying psychopaths, but it's because they're illiterate, because they don't actually understand the system that they have. And so, quite literally, as the system collapses, as it's designed to do, the economists that the liberals and the conservatives will look to in order to find a resolution to these crises will be incapable of understanding why the crisis exists in the first place. Can you debunk the stuff that Thomas Sowell produced? Oh my God. I mean, yeah, of course he's influential among the conservatives. He blames black people for their oppression, right? Like, you don't need to go too far or too deep into Thomas Sowell to see that he's like an Uncle Tom style figure, right? Like, ignore redlining, ignore like literal like lynch mobs, ignore black slavery, ignore the entire history of America, and instead just blame black people. But black people just need to work harder, right? Yeah, Sowell is a disgrace. It's easy to debunk him. You just have to not be a racist. Straight up. Like, if you're a racist, you think Thomas Sowell is great because he's a black man turning against his own people. He's an Uncle Tom, right? He's an Uncle Tom. Straight up. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say Uncle Tom, right? This is Uncle Tom is a phrase that comes out of black slavery, where you have, during that period of time, black people who worked on behalf of their white masters in order to keep other black slaves in line, right? That they would be like house slaves, and like the Uncle Tom style figures would be the guys who would like work in the house. If you watch Django, really illustrated what an Uncle Tom was really well with the character that Samuel L. Jackson played. Samuel L. Jackson's character was an Uncle Tom, right? And that's who Sowell is. He's just a person who has bowed his head to the white power structure, has turned his back on his own people and their plight, and lies about it, like big time. Like everything that Sowell says is based on these enormous lies, and you don't need you don't need to go too far to see that that's the case. And the only reason the conservative right takes Sowell seriously is because he reinforces the racism that they already have, right? Well, the right is strong because they actually have money. Like, the left doesn't have any money. Yeah, so there's a reason why the left ignores Sowell, because, he discredits himself, right? Like, it's not hard to point that out. You just have to not be a racist. Yeah. Trying to decipher your numbers here, bud. Oh yeah, like I can't believe the liberals are actually seeing a surge up. We'll see how it all comes down when it comes time for election proper. We'll see. Yeah, conveniently ignores Nixon and Reagan's war on drugs. That's a really good one, actually. That's a real good one to bring up, as y'all. Like, Thomas Sowell, but Thomas Sowell ignores everything. He ignores redlining, he ignores the war on drugs, he literally ignores slavery. Like, I don't know what you need to hear when it comes to Sowell. That, like, what, for a man to blame, and, like, forget about, like, black man, like, just a person, for any person to ignore that the plight of black people in America is like a systemic ongoing problem. Like, you have to be like detached. Like, you've got to be, like, literally, like, listen to Martin Luther King, listen to Malcolm X, listen to modern black leaders, like, listen to the Fred Hampton Institute, listen to Chris Hedges, like, listen to people who are actually telling the truth about what's happening in America. Like, there are enormous amounts of black people currently imprisoned. The American prison system is like between 22 and 25% of the world's prison population is in America. And of that prison population, the vast majority of them are people of color. So this idea that Thomas Sowell walks around and says, "Oh yeah, that's all black people's fault," is childish, deluded, and you have to be racist to believe it. Like, you have to be. And because you can just look with your eyes. Listen to what aides from the Nixon administration outright said about the war on drugs. They said outright, they've admitted it outright, that the reason why they launched the war on drugs was to destroy black organizations, right? Like the Black Panthers, for example, right? The reason they launched the war on drugs was to be able to infiltrate and destroy black organizations. Like, get fucked, Thomas Sowell. You fucking piece of shit. I'm sure they paid you really well to betray your people like that, dude. I'm sure. And I'm positive of that, actually. Like, I'm absolutely positive that he lived a very comfortable life betraying his own people and lying about them and just enforcing white supremacy and racism as an Uncle Tom in his own society. There, you want a critique of Thomas Sowell? You've got one. Go watch Django. Samuel L. Jackson's character, that's Thomas Sowell. He's a despicable person. I bet you could get views if you took a short Sowell vid and debunked him. I'm too tired for that shit these days, guys, I gotta tell you. Just, like, I wish that I could just take, like, January, February, like, off and go to sleep. But that's life for you, isn't it? Venezuela reports first Omicron variant case. Omicron super mild cold like symptoms. So all the best in Venezuela. Yeah, worth reporting, of course. We've got 9,571 cases here in Ontario, which was predicted, right? We're following a predictable trend. But 6 deaths. Yeah, it's the same story over and over again. Hospitalization is low. If you're vaccinated, it's very unlikely that you are going to experience hospitalization. The people who are being hospitalized and dying of it are the unvaccinated. So it's like, what can you do? But in terms of, like, should we be scared of this? Should we be locking down? I don't think so. Like, it really is showing that if you're vaccinated, it's about as deadly as like the common cold. It's like, oh, okay, like we lived with that for decades and decades and decades, and it was completely fine. So Trump will be 80 in 2024. Will he be 80 in 2024? That's great. That guy is just getting like. It'll be so great when Donald Trump is reelected. When Donald Trump is reelected, things are going to get like real fun. I got rid of my credit card, so I'll send a check for the Patreon. Well, don't worry so much about it, Barnabas, honestly. That's very kind of you to say. And not a bad idea to get rid of your credit card, dude. Like, I've never had a credit card. What a scam those things are. Biden's 79 right now. Bernie is 80. Pelosi's 81. So many oldies in government. Yeah. There's a reason why nothing can happen in America, because you've got all these like old rich people who are completely detached from reality, who still think like the internet is a series of tubes. Thoughts on Jackson Hinkle? I haven't watched too much of Hinkle. He floats around. He's presenting himself well. The slicked hair, the shaven kind of thing. Like, I actually think he would have done very well back in the old like newsroom days, right? When that was something serious. Like, and that seems to be what he's trying to present. He's trying to present himself as like a clean cut kind of serious sort of guy. I think that Jackson Hinkle is really mainly commenting on the movement itself. That's what I think of him ultimately, is that, like, while I am attempting to comment on the news and the day's events and create like a communist framework for understanding what we're seeing and interpreting, someone like Jackson Hinkle prefers to delve into the drama between people who are doing that, right? So like Jimmy Dore versus Sam Cedar, Vosh versus this guy, right? Like his preference. So in that way, he ends up being mainly like an Entertainment Tonight sort of figure, right? That and again, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I actually think it's good. It's good that there are people popping up like that who are primarily focusing on the interpolitics of the people who are doing the commentary itself, right? So for example, like should I continue growing and should I become a bigger channel and should I get to that kind of place where I could begin to talk to people like Sam Cedar or Hassan or any of that kind of stuff? Well, Hinkle will end up talking about me. And I likely won't talk about Hinkle because I don't find him to be that interesting a figure. Like, it makes sense that he's there, and I've got nothing against him as a person, and I'm sure that he's doing his best to represent himself as well as he possibly can. But I don't really think he's like, I consider myself a reporter and a news person, and I consider him to be like Entertainment Tonight. And that's fine. Anybody who's bothered to study freedom quickly realizes that freedom is embedded within a social context. You can't have a perfect egoist view of freedom. Yeah, if you have a perfectly egoist view of freedom, it's not freedom, it's selfishness, right? That if you don't want freedom for someone else, then you're not actually interested in freedom. You're interested in selfishness. That's really what it is. You're using the word freedom, right? But that you're not interested in freedom. That freedom has to apply to everybody, right? And it has to be embedded in this idea that I want everyone around me to have the maximum amount of freedom. And there are certain types of freedoms that take precedent, right? Like, I can't walk around saying I should be free to murder people, right? Like, no one's going to buy into that. Why? Because the people you murder are no longer free, right? Very clearly. You can't just have a simple, selfish view of what freedom is. That it's got to be, exactly as you say, within a social context, you have to think about what it's doing to your neighbor. And like the most recent conversation, like I should be free to wear a mask if I want to or not wear a mask if I want to. And it's like, okay, but like we're talking about a health and safety issue here. Do you think that people in your society should be free to not get a disease? Like, do you think there should be a certain degree of freedom in the society to be healthy and safe, right? And if you say no to that, then I don't know what to say to you. Like, I just think that you're just a selfish child at that point, right? Like, yes, everybody should be safe and healthy in their society, and the freedom to be safe and healthy in your society takes precedent over your desire to not wear a mask over your face. Like, sorry, dude. Sorry that there's rules that we expect to follow. Sorry that you need to follow a bedtime. Like, that's the level of childishness that we're getting to in the society, right? Bedtimes are authoritarian, like this kind of fucking childish nonsense. Like, do you cry like a baby when you have to put your seatbelt on, right? Like, do you cry like a baby when you've got to go get a license to go drive a car, right? Like, the society enforces all kinds of rules on us constantly. I gotta stand at this red light instead of walking? I'm not free to walk when I want to walk? This is just like the Holocaust. I'm the same as the Jews. Like, big yikes. Thoughts on Charlie Chaplin? Charlie Chaplin was a boss. Charlie Chaplin was a boss, man. Like, yeah, he had some questionable affairs, let's call it, right? Let's call it. But like The Great Dictator was great work. And honestly, the character of the Tramp is still iconic. Like, he's super iconic. No, Charlie Chaplin is one of those like early day artists. Like a great American artist. Great American artist. You can't ignore him. And unlike other contemporaries of his, I'm thinking someone like Buster Keaton, for example, Chaplin became more politically motivated and politically attached. I mean, for God's sakes, he was banished from America for a period of time for his views and his political views. So, like, you know, Charlie Chaplin's life and the movie Chaplin, where Robert Downey Jr. plays Charlie Chaplin, is really great. It's a really great movie that I think is pretty fair to Chaplin, and really sees him as a person, understands his flaws, of which there were, right? Understands who he was, while simultaneously seeking to uplift his legacy. And yeah, again, like the Dictator and the speech that he gave in The Dictator, I think there's a reason why that speech tends to make the rounds every so often, because it's powerful stuff and really, really shows you why the capitalist death cult fights against artists and artistry as hard as it possibly can, because they know that their greatest enemies are the artists, right? That it is the artists that will articulate and find the language to describe their oppression and describe why the system of capital is as demonic as it is, right? And so you have to destroy that. You can't let artists exist in your society in significant ways. Like, and the artists that do exist are just like, you know, flamboyant spectacles at best, right? Like Lady Gaga wearing like a suit of meat, or like lights her piano on fire or something like this, right? As long as they're not making any kind of political statement, as long as they're not really saying anything of importance, then they can be permitted to exist. But should you actually stand up and attempt to articulate the destruction of the society at the hands of a capitalist death cult, no, that can't be permitted. Tom Hartman also demonstrated that the reason the U.S. doesn't have health care is because of racism. Yeah, I think that there's something to that. Like, a big reason why they won't do a universal health care system is because it will also help black people, and they can't find a way to put in a universal health care system that would only benefit white people. Like, yeah, so far there are only 1 to 3 deaths internationally related to Omicron. Yeah, it's fairly mild. Seems fairly mild. Like, people are still being a bit, like, reserved about it. They don't want to push their chips all the way in and say straight out, like, it's safer. But it does look like, in terms of transmission, like everyone's going to get this thing. And honestly, if this is what COVID turns into, if COVID just turns into like another version of the flu or the common cold or any of this, like the populace is just going to throw their hands up and just start moving on with their lives. Yep. Daily reminder, the U.S. state drugged and shot Fred Hampton. Well, and they assassinated Martin Luther King. They assassinated Malcolm X, right? Like, the idea that, like, this we were just talking about Thomas Sowell. Like, the idea that, like, yeah, dude, like, there's no state oppression. There's no state repression there. It's just that, oh, all the black leaders got executed. You know, like, got assassinated. Oh, yeah, that's just a normal thing that happens in a society, right? I've seen a libertarian argue that he has mixed feelings with Squid Game because the people who went there voluntarily chose to participate. So for them, murder is totally justified if they voluntarily chose to participate. This is actually a really interesting thing to bring up, because this sort of focuses in on the flaw of libertarianism. I mean, of which there are many, but this is one of the central flaws. Libertarians don't ever acknowledge the reality that there are systems that, if you exist within a system of coercion, there is no such thing as voluntarily choosing something. They just deny outright or ignore the reality of that statement, right? That if you are in a system that is coercive and gives you a series of options, all of which are bad, you are not actually free or volunteering. So, for example, in the system of capital, the system begins by withholding food and shelter from you, right? It doesn't provide food and shelter. It says, if you would like to live, like literally not starve and not die of exposure, you have to sell yourself into a labor market, right? So none of that is voluntary, right? And libertarians just ignore that. It's just not part of the way they talk about the world. And so in the case of Squid Game, right, is it actually voluntary, right? Like, it's the best option for them, right? Certainly. It's and just how, like, if I had 4 jobs in front of me, and one of them paid better than the other ones, well, yeah, I'll take the one that pays the best. And then if a libertarian attempted to say, oh, so you voluntarily chose to work at that place, I'd be like, no, that was the place that was paying the best, and if I have to pick from like 4 or 5 equally shitty options, I'll take the one that gives me the best outcome for myself, I suppose. But there's nothing voluntary about it. I need food and shelter, right? Much in the same way that, like, so here you have these like desperate people who they themselves, you know, are, and what's interesting about Squid Game is it doesn't absolve the individuals for the circumstances of their life. Like, each one of them is like a gambling addict or a literal like criminal, like this sort of stuff. Everybody is caught in their own shit, but that the shit that they're caught in is exploited by the system that they are in. And so and so many of these people who end up in Squid Game, well, they just see it as the best opportunity that they've been given, right? That if there was another thing going on, or said, hey, we can just give you food and shelter over here, like, we'll just give you that. How many of these people would actually go for Squid Game, do you think? Right? Like, is it voluntary to create a society in which people become so desperate that they're willing to risk their lives for the 1 in 200 chance to win $1 billion? Right? Like, is that voluntary? No. Like, what are these people's other option? Like, what's their other option, really? And it's explicitly stated in Squid Game. Their other option is to go back to their lives and have it crumble around them and likely die in homelessness and poverty. It's not much of an option, honestly. It's not a choice. right? It makes sense that those people went and did that because it's the only opportunity they've been afforded. It's the only choice they have. And it's not much of a choice, really. And like, if you really want to get into the voluntary or consent nature of the Squid Game, right? Like the initial game, they didn't tell these guys that they were going to kill them, right? Like they put everybody in the room and they said words like eliminated, right? So it's straight up murder what they did. Like it's straight up murder what happened there, for sure. But the society that these people are living in is so desperate and so based on principles of abandonment that really what they come back knowing that they're going to be killed in arbitrary and meaningless ways, because what else are they going to do? I have so much communist history to learn. Yeah, me too, dude. Well, at the same time, deprogramming my brain of capitalism, it's a steep learning curve. Well, and so much of like the deprogramming of capitalism, like I still am finding new thresholds of disgracefulness, right? When it comes to the lies that capitalism is willing to tell. Like the 30 million dead of a famine narrative that came out of Mao's Great Leap Forward, right? Like even now, like even about a month ago, I was still going like, okay, there's got to be some truth to this, right? Like there has to have been a famine. There has to have been some kind of major event that occurred during that period of time. It has to have been. Like very much how the Soviet case, right? That, yeah, there was a famine. The Holodomor, like there was a famine, for sure, right? It's just the narrative that we're told about that famine is false and usually based on Nazi propaganda, straight up. And so it's like, okay, so like here's a case where there is a famine, and you guys are just like lying about the sources, lying about how it occurred, trying to blame the Soviets for intentionally committing to a genocide when there's no evidence of it whatsoever. And but in the case of Mao's Great Leap Forward, there isn't even a famine. Like it's literally nothing. Like literally nothing. And a famine that killed 30 million people? Are you kidding me? Like where's the refugee crisis? Where's even a single commentator being like, hey, there's a famine going on there while it was happening? They don't exist. They simply don't exist. Why? Because there was no famine and there never was one. So this 30 million people dead of a famine in China is like a bald face. They're looking you right in the face and just straight out lying to you. In like the most vicious way that a person can lie. It's based on absolutely nothing. And so you're always finding that shit. You're always finding that shit. And it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. The depravity has no bottom. If you want theory, try Marxist Paul's Communist 101 playlist. Yep, good stuff. Or just straight up, like, there are audio files of on YouTube, like the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, right? Like people have read these things aloud. You can just put them on and listen to them while you do chores or whatever it is, right? Like if you want theory, right? You can go to like people like Marxist Paul or me or any of this kind of stuff. But the thing to do is to actually read theory. Like actually like read the books that Mao wrote. Read the books that Stalin wrote. Read the books that Trotsky wrote. Read the books that Lenin wrote. Like, and they're all audiobooks on YouTube for free. You can go find them and you can listen to them, right? And they're good stuff. Like, they're good stuff. I'm banned from Tom's channel. I don't know who Tom is. Thanks. Check it out. Did you see the new Gray Zone article about BreadTube CIA ties? I haven't seen the Gray Zone article, but Caleb Maupin has been talking about that for a long time. Caleb Maupin wrote a book called BreadTube Serves Imperialism, and I haven't read the book itself, but I've heard him talk about it enough to understand these ties. And I wouldn't be too surprised. I wouldn't be too surprised if they reference that book, actually. Here, let's just Gray Zone Bread tube CIA. Maybe I just go to Gray Zone directly. Da Gray Zone! I can't see it. I can't see it. Did the CIA kill JFK? Oliver Stone on his explosive new film. The answer is yes. The CIA killed JFK. Like, seems pretty straightforward, honestly. Yeah, Venezuela's socialists win elections in a landslide, so U.S. tries to discredit them. I love coming to Gray Zone, dude. They're just, like, constantly dunking on these imperialists. It's hilarious. Anyway. David Harvey is a really good source to listen to as you read through Das Kapital. Good to know. Libertarianism response: capitalism is hegemonic. If you can't start a business, you have to enter into a very regulated relationship with a capitalist in order to support yourself. And even businesses are required to operate in certain ways. No diversity of structure. I mean, capitalism is hegemonic. Like, you're literally describing, like, subservience. Like, at what point are you supposed to be free or voluntarily doing anything, right? Like, in my view, a true libertarian would literally be like, we should have small democratic structures, so literally like a block in a city, like a single city block, should be democratic and should be able to discuss with itself what do we want to see and what businesses do we want. And if I have a business idea, I should be able to go to the people on that block and say, hey, I would like to open up a business in this space. And they should say, oh, great, let's do that. And then you should be able to do it just because everybody agrees you should be able to do it, right? And like, you should just get support from the institution itself, from literally the block democracy in order to do it. Like, to me, that's actually libertarianism. Like, what we're seeing in North America right now is not libertarianism. It's taking libertarianism and just turning it into like the ideas that are coming out of the libertarian movement now are literally like, we should enslave ourselves some more to capitalist systems. Like, deregulated capital, that's the way to do it. Like, no thanks. No thanks. Maupin has changed my mind on a few things. Not easy to do. Yeah, no, Maupin's great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, he's just like everybody else. He has his ups, he has his downs, right? And he seems to really be wading into the weeds of the Communist Party such that it exists in America. But I think that's good, right? He's the new generation of doing it, and he seems to want to tell the truth, which I think puts him well ahead of everybody else. You just described libertarian socialism, the true libertarian. Before Murray wrote, Rothbard stole the word. Yeah. No, it's capitalists have to distort, right? They can't let words mean what they mean, right? Like, it's that classic 1984 doublethink or doublespeak, right? Say one thing, mean another. All right, get rid of this. And get rid of this. Get rid of this. Oh, yeah. From the Jacobin, right? The secret to the Weston family's wealth is exploitation, not hard work. What? By Mitchell Thompson. Canada's ruling class is fond of praising the Westons for representing an ethical form of capitalism. That's cute. This couldn't be further from the truth. The Westons made their fortunes by ruthlessly exploiting workers. Disgraced ex-media magnate Conrad Black recently used the pages of his former newspaper to justify the fortunes of the Weston family. The owners of Loblaw Companies Limited, the wealth of the retail family are, Black claimed, the result of talent, savvy, and ability. The article, an obit for Galen Weston in the National Post, is a pitch-perfect example of elite backslapping and mutual approbation. Black writes fondly of the Westons' novel form of Christian capitalism. the inborn altruism of their companies, and the noble policy of seeking no or minimal public recognition for their good works. The narrative that Black spins about the heroism of the Weston's business acumen is ludicrous. It could only have come from a fellow traveler of Canada's ruling class. Funnily enough, one does not need to rely on leftist caricatures to find a rejoinder to Black's fanciful hagiography. The Westons and their surrogates have clearly stated that the program of wage and job cuts as well as monopolization have maintained the family's wealth. Business practices which do not figure into Black's fawning account of the family empire are the cause of the Westons' immense fortune. Although you wouldn't know this from reading the National Post's glowing obituary of Galen Weston. Black's gloss on the family is exemplary of the grand lies that elites tell one another about themselves. It is exactly this sort of pageantry that creates a misconception that what is good for business is, in fact, good for everyone. The Westons, economic royals straight from central casting. On the north end of Vero Beach on the coast of Florida sits Windsor, the sprawling estate of the billionaire Weston family and other giants. This plutocrat's paradise hosts over 250 mansions, a polo field, rows of beachfront streets named after Weston companies, and the former residence of the notoriously widely traveled King Edward VIII. Alongside Galen and Galen Weston Jr., Windsor has hosted Polish aristocrats, Amway CEO Dick DeVos, and Swarovskis, Andre Desmarais, and of course, Conrad Black. Black, the inheritor of major estates in the Ravelstone Corporation, the Argus Corporation, and by extension Massey Ferguson, Hollinger Mines, and more, has a profound respect for the late Galen Weston. Perhaps this feeling of amity stems from both men's background as inheritors of massive wealth. Galen Weston inherited his fortune via his stake in George Weston Limited. Black insists that Galen Weston, the scion and continuator of a great family, will be fondly remembered. The highly competitive retail business in several countries confirms the remarkable fact that 4 consecutive generations of the Weston family have been outstandingly successful in their chosen profession. Black observes that the Westons had the taste and habits of hereditary wealth. Polo, real estate, and religion were their pastimes. Missing in Black's account is any explanation of where the Westons' wealth actually came from. Black does give us a thumbnail sketch of the Weston story. George Weston founded a bakery in Toronto in the late 1800s. It was his son, W. Garfield Weston, who fatefully purchased shares in Loblaw, at the time a provincial food chain, with a benign fervor. The family business, George Weston Limited, became the parent company of Loblaw. Garfield's son, Galen, exhibited a seamless generational evolution. Above all, Black says, the Westons dedicated the fruits of their labor, or the fruits of their efforts, to the unquestionable good of the population in all counties where they have operated. The Westons themselves, however, appear to share no such illusions about their business or its modus operandi. The actual story is as follows. George Weston opened his bakery in 1882, in the early years of Canada's wheat boom. The company was renamed G. Weston's Bread Factory in 1890 when it added mechanical mixers and expanded the factory's workforce. But as early as 1905, Galen Weston took advantage of a loose labor market to lower the wages of his 55 employees. When these workers went on strike, Weston threatened to fire them, telling one local paper, "I never saw so many men willing to step in and fill vacant places." George Weston died in 1924. He passed his fortune down to his son, W. Garfield Weston, the Biscuit King. In the early days of the Great Depression, he went on a buying spree, acquiring competitor bakeries amidst economic crisis. In 1939, he was elected as a British Conservative MP, but would leave politics 4 years later. His business empire, he claimed, would best serve this country and my native Canada and the empire as a whole. According to Maclean's, by 1948, the family empire had outposts in 6 of the United States and had spread to India, South Africa, and the West Indies. By 1955, his shares in Loblaws gave him control of 156 stores, $220 million in assets, and effective market dominance across Canada through the post-war boom. Dominion Stores, headed by Bill Horsey with the backing of the Argus Corporation, was Loblaws' only real rival. This limited competition wasn't won by Weston's savvy or generosity, but with economies of scale, massive facilities strategically located in mass market areas. Weston was keen to move production to lower wage jurisdictions, especially apartheid South Africa. Dismissing any suggestion that black South Africans were being mistreated, Weston said of his factories in the country, "Bausto boys can work 2 or 3 months and then go back to the jungle and buy another wife." A supporter of apartheid, he is on record as having opposed the extension of voting rights to black South Africans for fear that it would mean that every black pickaninny or mammy can call on the government for solutions to every social problem. Exploiting low-wage labor abroad has been key to the Weston's wealth for decades. Their apparel brand Joe Fresh made headlines in 2013 after one of its suppliers, the Rana Plaza garment factory in Bangladesh, collapsed, killing more than 1,000 workers. The victims still haven't been fully compensated. In Canada, in the early post-war boom, the Weston's workers, organized chiefly by the Retail Warehouse and Department Store Union, did secure a few collective agreements and even wage increases, but the gains would not last. In 1968, the company's board brought Galen Weston on to manage Loblaw, by then one of Canada's largest employers. At the time, sales were slowing down. Having already introduced layoffs across the franchise in the mid-1960s, the Globe described Weston's response to flagging earnings as a massive restructuring, notable for ruthless cutting of assets and personnel. By 1972, facing lower-cost competition from Dominion, Loblaw sold off more than 2/3 of its stores. At the same time, Argus's new owner, led by none other than Conrad Black, were slowly selling off Dominion's assets. The two companies appear to have spent much of the 1970s and 80s mimicking one another. In 1987, Weston purchased all that remained of the former Dominion stores for $40 million. However, the acquisition left the problem of Dominion's pension surplus fund outstanding. The fund had been a particular sticking point since at least 1985, when management described by the Toronto Star as Black and his partners changed the pension plan to allow them to withdraw $37.951 million. Defending the change, Black claimed management was, in fact, the victim. A felonious minority of employees had been in the habit of stealing $30 million a year from Dominion inventory. While the Supreme Court of Ontario censored Black and his partners in 1986 and ordered them to return the surplus, the workers were not guaranteed their full pensions in the sale. As the Globe and Mail noted February 3, 1987, the union and Dom Group also struck an agreement over the distribution of $60 million in surplus pension funds, subject to the approval of the Pension Commission of Ontario and the courts. The proposal calls for giving members 1/2 of the funds from the former Dominion Stores pension plan. In 1988, the Globe noted that Galen Weston, the owner of 58% of George Weston Limited, was one of the 100 wealthiest men on earth. That same year, the firm tasks its new CEO, Richard Curry, with generating further profit improvements. The directive was clear, and Curry took up his task with relish. In a speech transcribed by the Ivy Business Journal, Curry explained that competition from anti-union employers like Walmart, coupled with a flagging economy, condemned Loblaw to a slow growth future. Explaining the company's slump, Curry claimed that weak management had allowed the store asset base to erode and provided fertile opportunities for labor unions. Accordingly, to survive, Loblaw would have to stretch its variable costs, making the case for cutting workers' pay. Curry deployed staple business speak to make this case. Profit improvements in the 1990s are likely to become primarily from the bottom line cost reductions and lowered break-even points, rather than from the top-line sales and margin expansion strategies much more common in the 70s and 80s. In 1994, during negotiations with the United Food and Commercial Workers at Zehrs Fortinos, Curry was more explicit, telling the Globe, "We're looking to lower our labor costs relative to sales." In June 97, Curry philosophized about the big picture concerns. Operating with a unionized workforce may in fact be obsolete. Since the 1990s, Loblaw's successive annual reports have indicated returns on investment far above the Toronto Stock Exchange average, but the demand for cuts hasn't stopped. Loblaw's unionization rates have hovered at about 50%. In nearly every dispute it has had with employees, the company has fought tooth and nail to cut workers' pay, scheduling rights, and benefits. As it has clawed back all the past gains of unionization, the Weston family wealth has grown. In 2006, Galen Weston Jr. took over as Loblaw's CEO. At the time, Maclean's noted that this changing of the guard was in advance of an imminent strike by unionized workers in Ontario. The strike was in response to management's demands for wage cuts. In 2010, 1,700 workers in Sarnia, Chatham, and Windsor faced wage and benefits cuts of up to 25%. Loblaw's public relations VP justified the cuts in the name of operational flexibility. In 2018, Loblaw's executives further opposed a credit union shareholder proposal to pay its workers the income necessary to support families. The directors say this would again restrict the company's competitive flexibility. More recently, after cutting workers' pandemic pay, Weston demanded cuts to COVID-19 support for the unemployed. In a public letter to the Business Council of Canada, Weston and his co-authors argued that the elevating the unemployed above abject poverty is unacceptable, because it may mean that employees lack incentives to return to low-wage work. Meanwhile, over the course of the pandemic, the company's profits have risen sharply, and its billionaire owners have only gotten richer. Black's recent blandishments are not without precedent. The two sat on Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce board together for decades, and as Black recounted in his memoir, A Matter of Principle, when he faced allegations of embezzlement in 2003, and most of CIBC's board members advised him not to seek re-election, Weston was one of the few to offer him any sympathy. Black's latest celebration of Weston, however, discloses a more awkward truth. The efforts of George Weston, Garfield Weston, Galen Weston, and Galen Weston Jr. have never actually helped to strengthen the social fabric of the communities or countries in which they have done business. For over 100 years, the secret ingredients that have made their firms dominant have been a lack of competition and poverty wages. In the face of these facts, Black's writes that a substantial portion of the fruit of their efforts has thus accrued directly to the foundations and the unquestionable good of the populace in all the countries where they have operated. Black's is the master voice, unadorned. His view is a textbook example of the politicization of the interests of the business class. It is a narrative that asserts that the goals of business are virtuous. Full stop. But of course, the claim that exploitive practices that are reviled by the population at large are actually sound, common sense conventions that are in the national interest is preposterous. Black's fawning obit does us all a favor by exposing something that the ruling class are often too guarded to reveal. That they believe the rich deserve their fortunes because they are morally superior to the people they exploit. What we see in these defenses of wealth is a return to a justification of inequality, which has its origin in feudal conceptions of the natural inferiority of the poor. It is therefore no surprise that Black can laud the billionaire family for having the tastes and habits of hereditary wealth. We should take the fact that the right is emboldened enough to speak plainly about their views, to speak plainly about our own, against inequality and for equality, against hereditary wealth and for socialism. The Weston's fortune should be put in the hands of the talent that actually created it. Loblaw's thousands of ill-treated, low-wage workers. Mitchell Thompson is a writer, researcher, and occasional radio producer in Toronto. These articles are really making me believe that I could probably write an article about the National Post's Capitalist Manifesto and seek to get it published in Jacobin. And I could probably do it. I think I could probably do it. I think I'm going to try. You know? I think I'm going to try. Because I want to do a larger commentary and a larger sort of expose on the Capitalist Manifesto and really show how fucking fraudulent and gross it is. And I think the Jacobin would be the place to publish it, honestly. I'm going to try. See where it goes. What are you guys saying? I was reading that for like 20 minutes. The modern-day libertarian movement was a result of the Austrian school of thought. Yeah, this fraudulent, I think the Austrian school of thought is like literally saying like the brain rot school of thought. I am reading through the Libertarian Manifesto by Murray Rothbard. Basically at every page he uses the word libertarian. Yeah, and it's like the inversion of what it actually is. Workers work, owners don't, but owners eat anyway, yeah? As for Caleb Maupin and his book about how BreadTube uphold neoliberalism or whatever it's called, it actually is junk. Ooh, it is a book as a result from a dispute that he had with people like Thought Slime and never actually deals with any of Thought Slime's arguments, but creates strawman arguments. Oh yeah, okay. That's unfortunate to hear, dude. That's unfortunate to hear. I don't know why you'd ever bother, like, ruddering up against Thought Slime. Like, really. Like, Thought Slime is about as innocuous as it gets. Like, he's not really challenging anything in serious ways. You know? Like, he has some interesting videos, and he seems like a fine fellow, but, like, like, Thought Slime is, like, the definition of a non-threatening leftist, right? Like, if Thought Slime becomes, like, the face of leftism, like, the capitalist power structure will be like, great. Like, he's essentially harmless. What's the secret of your success? I was born rich and exploit the workers in my family's business. Yeah. And that's like the story for all of them, right? Oh yeah, I love this. China is supposedly taking over Africa. Meanwhile, a single Frenchman controls almost 20 seaports across Central and West Africa. Yes, yet crickets from the Western media. French billionaire Vincent Bolloré of Bolloré BATL now controls Ghana's biggest port, Tema, thanks to a deal that tilted against the West African country's interests. An investigation by Africa Confederation. Tema is the 16th Western African port Bolloré controls. Guys, China's building a port! China's building a port in Guinea! Ah! Yeah, one billionaire owes 20 pork. That's fine! Like, we're such a bunch of fucking losers. We're such a bunch of fucking losers. Oh yeah, absolutely, right? Netflix. Get out of here, uTorrent. Netflix. And then Prime Video, HBO Max, Disney Plus, uTorrent. Like, if you were to subscribe for all of these platforms, it costs more than cable did now to do it. It's like, nah. Get fucked. Incidentally, speaking of media worth watching, I highly advise watching Arcane. It's on Netflix. Yes, it's based off of the video game League of Legends. It's still probably one of the best stories I've seen told in a long, long time. It combines familial politics, local politics, city politics, national politics and global politics all together, while simultaneously having incredibly interesting and complex characters. Like, each individual character has their own motivations, their own desires. They're in their own position in the world that they're in. And even the villains, you find yourself being like, yeah, I get it. I get it. Like, there's no just like I'm evil because I'm evil. Like, everybody is extremely well justified in their position and where they stand and who they are. Yeah, Arcane is very, very strong storytelling, Shakespearean in scale. Every shot is a work of art. It combines politics, science, magic, in a brilliant work of art that it has such an incredibly successful ending that is just so, it just fulfills everything and leaves so much potential. So, Arcane is definitely susceptible to Marxist analysis. Absolutely. Issues like poverty, the struggle between the uppers and the unders, right? Like the struggle between the nation of Zon and the city, right? And the inequalities that are rampant and exist structurally. And I actually felt like Arcane did a really good job of showing that those inequalities were structural. That Caitlin, who is of the wealthy class in one of the wealthy houses, her journey down into Zon and her desire to not believe that her own people and her own country bears any responsibility for the grinding poverty that is obviously in front of her, and eventually becomes convinced through her connection with well, now we're getting into spoiler territory. I won't go any farther because I really do think that it's a, like, Arcane is one of those shows that I'm very tempted to do a rip apart, to really be like this character and like do an entire thing just on that character. Very, very tempting. As a former Dota player, I'm a little embarrassed of their series in light of Arcane. Yeah, Arcane is like a next level thing, dude. Like, it really is the first successful adaptation from a video game that, like, and if it's not the first successful one, like, you could argue there's been a few successful ones, but it's definitely the most successful one. Like, they really, and the strength of the show is that they, like, so often when there is a translation from a video game to like a movie or a television show, there's like an abandonment of the source material. So often they just reject major aspects of the source material and change it for whatever reason, whatever justification they have. Arcane does exactly the opposite. It really is just like, oh, like, this guy is like a critter creature. Like, there's like an alien creature that's like a critter that, like, and he's like an ancient inventor and a critter like this. So that's his character and that's who he is, and all his decisions are going to be like that. Like, and every character is like that. It's like they pulled out. They're like, oh, this and it informs how they operate in the world, and like, I've played a little bit of League of Legends, not like a ton, but boy howdy, if I was a person who was a big fan of some of the characters, like if I played like Jace, for example, or Victor, I would be over the moon with how much love and care they've obviously taken to be like making decisions specifically by drawing from the original source material. Like, they really, really went out of their way. It's like the opposite of what they did with Star Wars. That with Star Wars, they just basically flipped the bird at the source material, said "fuck you, Luke Skywalker," "fuck you," like all of these old characters. Like, who gives a fuck? We can just do what we want with them. Tell them to go fuck off and die. We don't need to pay any attention to the books. We don't need to pay any attention to the literally decades of source material that has been written and used about these characters. We can just flush that all down the toilet and tell this completely unrelated, incoherent story that doesn't even follow basic storytelling structures, in order to offend literally everybody. No, Arcane does exactly the opposite. It really accepts that this is popular. We will use this and do honor to it. And if this is the stuff they're going to produce, that show is going to be 10 seasons long for sure. For sure. Yeah, one of my friends who's more familiar with the lore did say they did change some of the lore. Yeah, I think that's true. I'm not that big into the lore. I'm not huge. But I think Jinx, they probably changed Jinx the most. But the story they're telling, Jinx's story, yeah, it's good shit. It's good shit. That if this is the shit that they're making, yeah, that show's gonna go for fucking ever. For fucking ever. It'll go until they want it to stop. And also, Judah Friedland, is that his name? There's a comedian with a new one out on Netflix. He used to do, what's his name? Judah Friedlander. His new one on Netflix. He's got a comedy special on Netflix that I think is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's taking so much of the angst and the anger and the frustration of what it is to be alive in America today, and just creating this beautiful art piece where he becomes a character who is simultaneously accepts that all of these atrocities that are occurring in America are real, but taking the classic American position of still justifying them within America's greatness. So it's brilliant. And when you compare it to what's coming out now with what's his name from the Man Show, David Cross's new comedy special. The timing of their comedy specials coming out kind of back to back like this is pretty telling, because I think that they don't want to censor Judah Friedlander, of course, but they don't necessarily want his stuff to have prominence. So they release him along with David Cross, who's going to draw a lot more eyeballs. And David Cross is essentially a Democrat, right? Whereas Judah Friedlander is not. So it's I highly advise seeking out Judah Friedlander's comedy special. It's real good shit. It's real good shit. I will laugh if they are able to surpass One Piece. I don't know what One Piece is. I don't know what One Piece is. I had this article because I was like, fall economic statement fails to act on tax fair promises to deal with big banks and tax. Yeah, just an article saying that the liberals aren't doing shit. You're like, yeah, we know. The liberals, they're not interested in doing anything. They don't do anything, right? They've been in power for a decade and they do fuck all, right? Oh, carbon tax, yeah, that'll really do it while they increase emissions by 30%. Oh yeah, anime, yeah. I'm not that familiar with One Piece. Anyway. This is interesting. While church attendance among Canadians plunges, belief in God stays nearly the same. I'm not surprised to see this. I do think that people have an understanding that there is some kind of larger superstructure going on. But these institutions are losing their credibility, right? What is credible about these any longer? I know I've talked about that earlier. I don't need to go too deep. But what is interesting, belief in God is lower among men, 50%, than women, 57%. So it's like a coin flip, basically. Younger people also believe lefts, with only 41% of respondents aged 18 to 34 say they believe, compared to 64% of those 55 years of age or older. Jedwab said young people are less likely to believe in God because they're still forming their own ideas about religion. They also said that they spend more time online, they may not encounter religion. Also, like, stop having sex with little boys. Like, pretty basic stuff, right? God, why doesn't anybody go to Catholic Church anymore? Probably because you guys are pedophiles, right? Probably. Just gonna put that out there. Wow, this One Piece. I can't believe, how has this gone under my radar? One Piece, manga. Is this a TV show? How come I haven't heard of this? It's like the most popular shit. Oh yeah, I've seen stuff from this. I don't think I've ever even seen a single episode, but... And it's been going on for over 20 years. Highly... Oh yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. It looks like it's a comedy. Like, it looks like it's a comedy. It's got that look about it. Anime. I have been looking for a good anime. Yeah, dig this. 1 in 3 GoFundMe campaigns are now for medical bills. GoFundMe is now one of the largest insurers in the country. The system is completely broken. I should say so. I should say so. Oh, this is hilarious. So we all heard the story about how the Americans were going to do a diplomatic boycott on China, right? Diplomatic boycott on China. Canada's getting involved in it. Okay. U.S. applies to China for 18 officials to attend Winter Olympics after Joe Biden declares diplomatic boycott. U.S. government applies for 3-month visas for 18 personnel to provide security support operations at Beijing Games. The U.S. government recently submitted to China an application for 3-month visas with a list of 18 names to attend games to provide security support operations, according to 2 sources and a document reviewed by the South China Morning Post. Of the 18 names on the list, 15 of the U.S. personnel work for the State Department, and 1 works for the Pentagon, said a source who requested anonymity. Most appear to be mid to lower ranking officials. The U.S. indicated to Chinese officials it might submit applications for 40 more officials in the coming months. Beijing considers a trip by 18 U.S. officials as defeating the purpose of a boycott against the Games. Washington believes the listed people are not official representatives, but rather will attend the Games for security and medical support. Speaking of comedic elements, Eric. Like, they just don't care, right? Like, they just don't care. Like, literally, they're gonna be like, we are boycotting the Olympics, and then they're just gonna send people. Like, they're just gonna send... Like, I wouldn't be too surprised if Joe Biden literally was like, the day before the Olympics started, was like, we are going to boycott the Olympics, and then, like, the day of the Olympics, he's, like, in the stadium, like, waving. Oh, and there's United States President Joe Biden showing up while under a diplomatic boycott. Like, they don't care. Like, they don't care. They why? I don't know why they bother lying anymore. Like, just fucking stand up and say it as it is. Like, one of the things that you've got to admire about Biden is that more often than Trump, for example, Trump, who is just like kind of a schemer type, who is just like always like a con man type, I should say, who is always trying to grift people, right? Like, at least Biden is standing up and being like, well, yeah, if you don't like it, you can go vote Republican. Fuck you. And you're just like, okay, Sleepy Joe, telling it how it is. All right. Oh, yeah. I watched several seasons of Bleach, then promised I wouldn't dive in any other serial animes like Naruto. It takes too much time. Yeah, isn't that true? Bleach was great, eh? The first season of Bleach was amazing. Was it the second season that was total bullshit, where there was like that vampire dude? It was the season they made up because they'd reached the end of the manga, and it wasn't releasing anything. And then I just never finished it. I just was like, come on, like you're in the underworld place, like just like I felt like Bleach fell for this kind of trap of like just padding. They were just always padding. Everything was just padding. It was constantly just like nothing. Like shows like Dragon Ball Z get this reputation for padding a lot. You get a lot of like, but when you watch Dragon Ball Z, it all has kind of an emotional resonance, you know? Yes, it takes them time to transform, and yes, all that kind of stuff, but it has an emotional resonance. Whereas Bleach just started to get really obvious that they were just like, oh, we got 100 episodes to fill, so, you know, take your time. Did you see Biden say, let's go Brandon on the news? Amazing. Are you serious? Oh, amazing. Biden says, let's go Brandon. Come on.
So I'm minding my business on this good Christmas Eve when I come across this video of Joe Biden having a conversation with kids about Christmas Eve, when one of the parents gets on and has these kind words to speak to Joe Biden. And his response is the most incredibly insane thing I've ever seen.
I hope you have a wonderful Christmas.
Well, yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas as well. Merry Christmas, and let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. I agree. Hey, by the way, where are you in Oregon? Where's your home? I think we lost him.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they cut him right after he said, let's go
So look,
Brandon.
I get it. A lot of people feel like the let's go Brandon thing is making guns too political. When I honestly disagree.
Making guns
the
too
whole
political?
basis for me and the whole let's go Brandon design from a 2A perspective is essentially pointing out the fact that Joe Biden is one of the most anti-gun presidents we've ever had. He has tried to pass
has Let's Go Brandon
the
become like a gun thing?
gun control bills that we've ever seen, not just in his presidency, but within his lifetime. He was responsible for the initial assault weapons ban. He brags about it. All of the things he's ever said that have been anti-gun. So I've been doing videos about Joe Biden for almost 15 to 20 years. And that's why I cannot stand Joe Biden. It's not because he's a Democrat. It's not because he's not a Republican. It's because he is Joe Biden and he is anti-2A.
This guy seems nuts, but I love him anyway. Like, look at him. Look at this. He's got, like, guns in the back of the wall. Like, he's got all this kind of stuff. He's wearing a shirt that says, let's go Brandon, with an FJB, like, with an assault rifle on it, a hat that says, let's go Brandon. And I gotta tell you, Biden's response to this let's go Brandon thing is exactly right? Let's go Brandon. Yeah, let's go Brandon. I agree. Because who gives a fuck? Like, who gives a fuck? I feel like this let's go Brandon thing is so overwrought. So, well, because I don't know, he probably wanted to do a follow-up, but the second the guy said, let's go Brandon, they cut him, for sure. Like, the second he said, let's go Brandon. Well, because they didn't expect Joe Biden to just be like, haha, yeah, let's go Brandon, I agree. Like, even if you take it for the one-to-one fuck Joe Biden that people seem to take it for, like, but interestingly, like, so am I to believe that "Let's Go Brandon" has like morphed in its meaning, in its initial meaning? We got like, okay, let's understand this. Let's go Brandon meme. What's happened? So 3 days ago, Forbes. Here you go. Let's go. In early October, a crowd watching a NASCAR race in Alabama began chanting something rather rude about Joe Biden. You can listen to it yourself here. The reporter for NBC Sports misheard the crowd, misinterpreting their chant as "Let's go Brandon," under the impression that they were referring to the winner of the race, Brandon Brown. That's not what happened. She very clearly heard what they were saying and made a choice in the moment to just kind of lie about it. To just be like, oh yeah, they said let's go Brandon. Like, very obviously that's what happened, but that's fine. The reporter's charming naivety seems to have delighted the mega crowd, And they've been repeating the phrase ever since as a way to signal both their support for Trump and their denial of Biden's election victory. But okay. But that's not what it is. Like, Let's Go Brandon exists as a critique of the media. That here is a moment where a journalist lied about what the events that were happening in front of her face in real time and changed the phrase, fuck Joe Biden, to Let's Go Brandon in front of everybody's face, right? That's the reason they adopted this phrase. Don't bullshit yourself, right? That one of the major critiques of the MAGA crowd, and honestly, it's understandable why it's their critique, is that the media lies about them all the time. And the media lies generally. And so here's a moment where the media is lying in front of your face in real time, and they adopt it. Like, yeah. What's so funny about that? It's certainly funny, but not for the reason Trumpists think. After all, if you wanted to yell something rude about Joe Biden, well, what's stopping them? The media. If you yell something rude at Joe Biden, you get censored. That's obvious. Biden gets aggressively criticized all the time from centrists, liberals, and leftists alike. Is the muted, damp phrase really the best the MAGA crowd could come up with? I hate this. Like, that everybody is trying to use Let's Go Brandon as a way to dunk on these guys. And it's not going to work. You're actually making yourself look really petty and childish. Like, really. Like, I think that the person that wrote this article is petty and childish. First of all, misrepresenting what is going on with the phrase "Let's Go Brandon," but then second of all, literally, is the muted, damp phrase really the best the MAGA crowd could come up with? They didn't come up with it. They didn't come up with it, right? They were given it by who? The media. What's even more amusing is the fact that they're so enamored with the phrase that they're still saying it months later. Because you guys keep writing articles like this. Like a bunch of school children muttering naughty words under their breath, terrified the teacher might actually hear them. Oh, how condescending can you be? How gross. Oh, just let me read that out loud again and just really revel in how gross this is. What's even more amusing is the fact that they're so enamored with the phrase that they're still saying it months later. Like a bunch of school children muttering naughty words under their breath, terrified the teacher might actually hear them. Ugh. No wonder they're still muttering it, dude, if this is your response. That's gross. Ugh. Let's Go Brandon movement is a sad echo of the initial confidence of the Trump movement. Imagine, if you will, living in an alternate reality known as Megaland, a place where you genuinely believe that the US presidency was illegally stolen from the rightful winner by a shadowy cabal of blood-drinking, skin-eating, devil-worshipping Democrats. I mean, the Democrats did steal the election from Bernie, right? We know that. They definitely stole it from Bernie when it was Clinton. And as more evidence comes in, it looks like they stole it from him with Biden again. So it's not that big a leap, right? It's not that big a leap to say that the Democrats are willing to steal an election away from Trump as well, right? That's why you don't want to do this kind of shit. You don't want to steal elections within your own party because it gives credibility to other parties to say these things about you, right? Then imagine that your response to this atrocity is to say, "Let's go, Brandon." This article's so gross, dude. It's just so smug and so self-assured. It's the same kind of shit that was happening when it was Clinton v. Trump, right? The smug, self-assured, these people are just a bunch of reprehensibles, the same crowd that once demanded Hillary Clinton be jailed without trial or that a gargantuan wall should be constructed across the Mexican border is now reduced to echoing a flaccid phrase so inoffensive it can't even be described as a dog whistle. Look at how much effort you're putting into it then, dude. If it's so flaccid and inoffensive, why'd you write this article? Why are you so offended by it? Like, you're obviously offended by it. Look at the article you're writing. Look at the language that you're using to describe something that is, and also to misunderstand it. Like, this is a big misunderstanding of what the power of that phrase actually is, right? It was a moment when the media lied directly to your face in front of, in spite of direct evidence to the contrary. That's the reason the phrase has power. Ugh. In fact, the slogan instantly sparked dollar signs in the eyes of the grifters and supplement salesmen that circle the waters of modern conservatism, as t-shirts, coffee mugs, and refrigerator magnets featuring the phrase quickly exploded into circulation. Yep, that is definitely true. There's almost something tragic about the whole affair. They can't even... But hold on. This is what I love. In fact, the slogan instantly sparked dollar signs in the eyes of the grifters and supplement salesmen that circle the waters of modern conservatism, as t-shirts, coffee mugs, and refrigerator magnets featuring the phrase quickly exploded into circulation. Isn't that just capitalism? You're Forbes. Shouldn't you be saying of these people who are commodifying this phrase to sell it to these people that here's a bunch of an astute businessmen that are making money off of a cultural phrase and icon? Isn't it weird how this veneration of capitalism gets twisted into demonization when it's about Republicans? Isn't that interesting? Can't imagine why America is so divided. There's almost something tragic about the whole affair. This article is the tragedy, dude. Holy shit. They can't even muster the energy to say something spiteful about Biden. No, you dumb fuck. They know that if they do say something spiteful about Biden, they are censored. You understand, you dumb fuck? If they actually do say fuck Joe Biden, they are censored. You dumb moron. You have to be, extraordinarily stupid not to understand that. So they buy t-shirts and murmur the name Brandon under the impression that they are owning the libs. Honestly, it's not that they're owning the libs. It's first of all, it's kind of fun. I love saying let's go Brandon. I think it's hilarious. Perhaps we should view the phrase as a positive development and acknowledge from MAGA crowd that their best days are truly behind them. Blah. Blah. Dude, Donald Trump is going to win the next presidential election, and it's going to make people like this guy, what's his name? Danny de Placido. It's going to make their brains blow the fuck up. When Donald Trump wins the next election, it's going to make these guys' brains explode. The only thing that might prevent Donald Trump from being elected next is that the people who are likely to vote for him are also the same people who died of COVID, right? So there's been a die-off of the people who may vote for Donald Trump. But the reality is the only reason why Biden was able to gain the support he needed to in order to defeat Donald Trump is because he ran on a platform of actually improving people's lives. And he hasn't, right? And so what you're going to see is you're going to see a very similar... It's like an echo of the Obama years, right? That Obama really got a huge upswell of people out, and it was an enormous showing. But then the second time around, there was a dwindling because people saw through it. That they became disillusioned. Well, the disillusionment that's going to occur from the Biden years going into this next election is going to be massive. Massive. And honestly, I do think that there's lots and lots of people in America who are looking back at the Trump years and are actually saying to each other, that wasn't so bad. Hey, he was kooky and weird, sure. But, is he better? Is he worse than this? Is he worse than this? And they're looking at each other and being like, not really, right? It's the same shit, right? So, I don't know. At least Donald Trump, Joe Biden said that he was going to actually do a whole bunch of stuff that he didn't do. Right? Trump didn't do that. Trump built that wall. Right? Was it a stupid promise? Sure. Did he do it? Yeah. I just think that there's... And the reality is that the MAGA crowd is highly motivated right? Highly motivated. Whereas the leftist crowd is not going to show up. They're just not going to show up. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good way of saying it, Matthias. Right politicians, brazen psychopathy. Leftist politicians, hidden psychopathy. Yeah. Do you like a guy walking around with a gun drawn at you, or do you like a guy walking around with the gun hidden behind his back? Yeah, keep laughing, dude. Yeah, these people make me want to get on the Trump chain. Exactly, and they don't realize how condescending they sound. Like, I'm not a Trump supporter by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I'm not like pro MAGA or any of that kind of shit. But like, I see them as they are. They are people, right? Like, they're not rapscallions or any of this kind of stuff. They're just people who don't know anything and don't know any better, right? In many ways, like, it is correct to call what's happening a tragedy. In many ways, like, these people, like, there is a level of delusion going on there. But the level of delusion that exists within MAGA is not greater than the level of delusion that exists in blue MAGA, right? Like, any blue will do. Like, the Russiagate shit. Like, it's the same kind of level of delusion making, right? They're jealous there's no energy like that on their side, and any energy the left has, they smother it. Yeah. I think that's an astute observation onward. Like, why isn't there the same kind of energy on the left? Well, it's because you keep fucking killing it, right? Which is the point of the Democratic Party. The only thing that Biden did right was to origins the vaccine distribution for U.S. citizens, while Trump was doing nothing. Well, Trump didn't do nothing, right? Like, but I mean, they didn't respond correctly to the thing in the first place. I give Biden kudos for pulling out of Afghanistan, but that's about it. Yeah, that's something of an inevitability. Trump was also negotiating a pullout from Afghanistan, right? Like, that was going to happen one way or the other, right? Like, it wasn't... they didn't need to be there anymore. It was just a resource sink. And it turns out that the conflict that it looks like the conflict that they're trying to pour the most resources into now is actually Ukraine. It really does look like this is the new focus of the empire. That I was worried that they were going to pull resources out of Afghanistan to start something up in Venezuela or in South America or something like that. But it really does look like they're pouring their resources into Ukraine in order to threaten some kind of conflict on the Ukrainian-Russian border. Putin recently did like a 4-hour lecture and question and answer that, of course, like, when I say recently, I mean like yesterday. I haven't had the ability to sift through, but the news that's coming out of it is that, like, yeah, he's angry about what's going on in Ukraine, and he should be. Like, he should be. It's an abomination what's occurring in Ukraine, right? Like, literally, the United States and NATO are overthrowing elected democratic processes, just installing their own leadership, funding neo-Nazi groups, refusing to vote on against the glorification of Nazism, right? Like, if I was the leader of a country that literally fought Nazis and defeated Nazis in a world war, yeah, I'd be furious. I'd be outright furious about what's going on in Ukraine. And this, to me, seems to be where the Americans and NATO and all of these guys want to put their energy. And it makes sense once you realize they've already admitted that they can't defeat China in a war, right? That going face to face with China is probably not going to happen. And so what they're doing here is they're trying to create a situation where they're going to protect America is in a position where it needs to protect its own assets, right? And its own assets is Europe, right? The allies, the NATO people, right? They need to protect Europe. America sees Europe as an extension of American power, right? And they can't have Europe swinging over to China. And right now, well, what's a surefire way to ensure that the Europeans won't be able to swing over to China? Well, make sure that they can't actually get goods successfully from the Belt and Road Initiative. And the Belt and Road Initiative runs through Minsk, right? So what are they doing? They're arming up Ukrainians, right? They're arming all of this shit up, making big hay about Ukraine versus Russia, Ukraine versus Russia, Ukraine versus Russia. It's Ukraine versus Belarus. That's what it is, right? Why? Because if they go to war with Moscow, right, they are opening up an entire can of worms with China. Russia and China have a military allegiance with one another, right? They have a defensive pact. If one of them is attacked, the expectation is that the other one will join in. And there's no reason to believe they wouldn't honor that. No such agreement between China and Belarus exists, right? An agreement between Belarus and Russia exists. So that means that if war were to break out, right? Well, and war has been breaking out in Ukraine itself as NATO funds neo-Nazi groups in the region. The point is to have that war spill into Belarus and to seize control of the Belt and Road Initiative at Belarus, thereby cutting off the Belt and Road Initiative from Europe from Belarus. They are building another line up through Turkey into Istanbul, but America can control this through other methods, right? When it comes to Turkey, they literally can just bomb Istanbul. Literally. And they will. Like, they will. Should it come to it, right? They don't give a fuck. Nobody has, like, big military allegiances with Turkey, right? They'll go in, they'll bomb the shit out of Istanbul. When it comes to Belarus, though, it's a little bit of a different story. So they're using this proxy war so that they can interfere with the Belt and Road Initiative in order to maintain the security and power of Europe. And they know that they're losing Australia. Like, they know they're losing Australia. It is simply a matter of time before Australia and China are just like, nah, like we're in it, right? Like, already Australia is saying, like, hey, can you guys just not do a war? Like, we kind of like trading with China and everything's okay with that. Like, can you guys kind of chill out? They're already talking that way. In 10, 20 years' time, Australia is going to be like, okay, like, we like, geographically speaking, they're right fucking there. Like, during the 2008 financial collapse, Australia didn't experience it. Why? Because they had a major trading partner in China, and China was stable during that period of time. So, like, the connection with China and Australia is very serious, and it's extremely likely that Australia will eventually consider China probably its closest ally. And that's going to happen pretty soon, sooner than you think. And that scares the shit out of America. That's scary. The idea that they're just going to lose. Like, imagine if they lost Canada, right? Imagine if they lose Europe. And this is completely possible. It's completely possible that Europe is just like, yeah. Especially after they re-elect Donald Trump. Like, after Donald Trump is re-elected, dude, like, it's gonna be a whole other can of worms, man. And honestly, it's not even going to need to be someone like Donald Trump. Like, it could be any of these Republicans, like Mike Pence, like any of these guys. Like, the Republicans are terrifying. And the idea that they're getting elected into the presidency is fucking terrifying. Like, if I'm a German citizen, I'm extremely terrified by these Republicans. Right? It doesn't take a big fucking, you don't need to do like a big expose and really like break everything down to be like, yeah, that looks like fucking Hitler to me. That looks like some crazed nonsense psychopathic bullshit to me. I give Biden kudos for pulling Afghanistan. If someone who has experienced racism from MAGA people, it's very difficult for me to see them as people. Yeah, I can appreciate that as y'all, right? And don't get me wrong, like the MAGA cult is like old school racism, The same people that were fighting against segregation, right? Like that crowd, for sure. yeah, MAGA aren't great people, but the other side is so insufferable, and the left isn't even part of the conversation right now. Yeah, that's what's annoying, is that, like, people call Joe Biden a communist, and I'm just like, what? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, commie is literally just a pejorative that is used to be like, oh, you want to help people, commie bastard. And you're like, what? Like, if you give people if you give a poor guy on the street like $1, you're a commie. Like, what the fuck? Russia isn't going to invade, but I don't know how I'd feel if they did. What would happen? They're not going to invade, dude. Like, that's just a Western narrative. Putin has said over and over and over again that he has no intentions to invade, and he's got nothing to gain by invading. Why would he invade? Like, really? Like, why would he invade? What's the benefit for him to invade Ukraine? Like, he should be upset about what's happening in Ukraine for sure, because it's just like a big clusterfuck off his border that he shouldn't have to be dealing with. Like, if I was Putin, I would love to live in a world where, like, oh yeah, the citizens of Ukraine elect their leader, and I, the leader of the Russian people, go and speak to the elected officials of Ukraine, and we arrange some kind of trade or some kind of way to coexist with one another peacefully. Yeah, that's what I would love, right? And the Americans and NATO are refusing to allow it to happen, right? And honestly, like, the people of Ukraine want that to happen. Right? Like, who doesn't want to be like, yeah, we elected our leader, and then the leader went and talked to the Russians, and we all said, like, yeah, we'll trade with each other. That's great. Like, who doesn't want that to happen? So yeah, like, people should be upset. People should be extremely upset about what's going on with this situation. And I mean, I know that I'm super upset at my leadership. Like, the Trudeau administration is outright funding neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. Like, that's just hard fact and truth now. Like, meanwhile, while also saying that he's more frustrated with people on the left than he is about people on the right. Like, can you believe it? Like, oh yeah, I'm not surprised that a guy that's funding neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine is more frustrated with leftists than he is with people on the right. Why? Because he aligns with people on the right. Like, he's fucking funding them, for God's sakes. Like, I just don't know what evidence we're going to need. Like, what do you think it's going to take? What do you think it's going to take for Canadians to finally be like, oh yeah, this guy's a neo-fucking-Nazi. He came out in blackface. Like, literally funding Nazi groups. Like, what do you think is going on here, guys? Russia's excuse for invading Crimea is the same excuse that they could use to invade Ukraine. Namely, that there are regions with majority Russian speakers. Hold on. What happened in Crimea was not an invasion. Okay? Crimea, the people of Crimea themselves voted to rejoin Russia. Right? They saw what was happening in Ukraine. Right? They saw what was happening in Ukraine. They got together. They voted together, and in a large majority said that they wanted to rejoin Ukraine. And Russia moved troops into the region in order to secure it, to officially proclaim that Russia was acknowledging the truth of this vote. And so as far as the Crimean people are concerned, as far as the Russian people are concerned, this was an agreement that they collectively reached together. And military troops were moved into the region in order to secure that and declare it on the international stage that was happening. That it wasn't just paperwork. We are willing to send troops in and defend this as a new Russian territory, which the people themselves voted for. So this idea that Russia created an excuse to invade Crimea, take it off the table. It's not what happened. Straight up, it's not what happened. The Crimean people wanted it, they voted for it, and Moscow sent troops in order to secure it, to abide by their wishes. Right? Like, if the Ukrainian people came together, and voted for to go back to Russia, to become a Russian province, and Putin moved troops in, and there was no, like in Crimea, it wasn't like people were shooting back. It's not like the Russians were moving in and people were like, oh, the Russians are invading us with an excuse they made up. No, there was no conflict, completely bloodless, right? If the same thing happened in Ukraine, people, I would be like, yeah, okay. Like, I would frankly prefer it that way. If I'm not entirely correct, you can chalk it up to perhaps a lack of deep knowledge or absorbing. Well, there's too much to know, dude. That's all it is. There's too much to know. Like, I never blame anybody for any of this shit. Like, and there's a difference between like not knowing something about a region and or like being willfully ignorant, right? Like, I feel like what you said to me was probably just something that you kind of heard or like sort of read about in like Western sources or any of that kind of stuff. But like once it's corrected, you can be like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? And I can show you shit, like there's evidence. But like, it's the people who are like, no, that's wrong. It was an invasion. They stole that land. It's like, why? Isn't it interesting that when it comes to foreign powers, like we care about stolen land a lot, but when it comes to like literally our own country, where we're like on stolen land, it just doesn't fucking matter at all. Dude, you've got so much peanut butter here. You got so much. Look how much peanut butter. Look how much peanut butter. As long as you're not doubling down, that's all. Like, as long as you're not doubling down. That's the shit I can't stand. That's where it gets real, like, Ben Shapiro dumb. Where you're just like... Breaking! Biden signs into law a bill banning imports from Xinjiang into the United States unless the company can prove they weren't made with forced labor. The bill passed the Senate 100-0 and the House 428-1. From Dr. Asatar Bear, who is a great communist. Really, seek this guy out if you want some good communist information. If applied to the U.S., this would cut several $1 billion a year of prison-made commodities. Bazinga! Get fucked! Get fucked! Putin is a very good speaker. Yeah. His press conference was great. The thing I really like, you can critique Putin. Don't get me wrong, and you should critique Putin. But the thing that I really like about Putin is that he is obviously interested in furthering humanity, right? Like he constantly brings up, why aren't we denuclearizing? Like, why are we still accelerating this nuclear conflict, right? Like, and you can critique Putin as like the neoliberal capitalist that he is, like he's an oligarch in the country, but like, he's not like off the rails like some of these guys. Like Elon Musk and Bezos are fucking off the rails, right? Like guys like Biden and Trump are like off the fucking rails. Putin, like, does he want power for himself? Yeah, absolutely wants power for himself. Does he want wealth? Yeah, absolutely he wants wealth. But does he think the world should be a stable place where there aren't these like nuclear fucking bombs rolling around? And does he wish that his neighbors were more stable and that everything was like cleaner? Yeah. And I think that puts him a step up from everybody else. Or from the Westerners anyway. I really need to stop debating with brainwashed people. I've been debating with this conservative who bought in this conservative propaganda the past year, trying to argue that fascism is a leftist movement. And they were pro-unions. That's high-level delusion, dude. Like, that's like, yeah, the SA Nazi was socialist. They're the National Socialist Party, so they're definitely left-wing. Like, completely ignoring the fact that Hitler, like, co-opted a socialist party, destroyed it from the inside, and, like, rebuilt it as, like, a far-right fascist movement, right? Like, ignore that. And, like, they were pro-unions. That is extremely easy to falsify. That is enormously easy to falsify. Did you know, fun fact, did you know that the first concentration camp that Adolf Hitler erected was not for Jews, it was for communists. Did you know that? Like, the idea that Hitler and the fascists were pro-unions is a, like, that's demented. Like, that's demented. Like, you're not, that's not even conservative propaganda. That's just, like, high-level delusionary bullshit. You're living in a fantasy world. You're living in La La Land. Like, that is so diluted. That is so diluted that it discredits the person who utters it as a thinker. Like, you can't trust a single thing they say. That's how demented it is. I did know that. Eric knows many things. Just like, there's no angle they're not going to try. They're going to lie about literally everything. And my deep fear, given the overt, like, psychotic nature of the capitalist death cult, my deep fear is that as they take the internet over, and when I say they take the internet over, I mean literally as they privatize the infrastructure of the internet itself, they will just eliminate from the internet not only leftist commentators like myself, right? They will eliminate, like, the work of leftists throughout all history. Like, people like Noam Chomsky, Michael Parenti, Chris Hedges. Like, these people will simply be scrubbed from the internet. Like, and there won't be a declaration of it. There won't be a big, like, screaming moment of it. They'll just begin doing it. And they'll just steadily scrub and steadily scrub and steadily scrub until the only people that you'll be able to find on the internet at all are the people who align perfectly with the ideology of the death cult. So your Shapiros and your Petersons, your Crowders, all this kind of stuff. Are you a pan-psychist? Divine being, divine energy, quantum being, quantum energy sounds like it. I don't define myself as a pan-psychist. Honestly, dude, like, Andrew, I consider myself, like, I just want to know what's the truth, right? And the truth is, this is why I say I don't believe it. Like, I don't believe what I'm saying. Like, this is just what's true, according to the mathematical models we have, according to the evidence and the facts that we have, right? There is underpinning all of creation, including you, including me, including this lamp, including all this, a quantum energy, right? A singular quantum energy. That's what's coming out of the secular sciences, okay? Like, I don't need to believe any of that. I just need to acknowledge the truth of it. And once you acknowledge the truth that there is a singular quantum energy that underpins all things, right? You realize that, oh, like, I am a quantum being. I'm made of quantum energy. I'm made of light. Like, I don't exist merely as a material vessel. I'm not just an ape, right? That my existence is predicated on the existence of this quantum energy, and we don't understand or know or understand at all why this energy is sustaining any of this. Why are there any of these models? Why do we exist at all? Like, none of those questions are seriously confronted. But what we do know is that the energy is there. We are it, and it is us, right? And that creates an equality of validity, that we are equally valid with one another because of the existence of this quantum energy and because of the nature of our life-death cycle, right? And I don't like to define myself as like a panpsychist. Like, I follow what's true, and what's true is that there is a quantum energy and that we are it and it is us. That's just the truth. If anything, like, I mean, like, sometimes just as a joke, I call myself a secular theist. Just to get people to be like, what? That sounds like incoherent. But I'm like, nah, it isn't. Like, it isn't, actually. Like, the idea of a quantum energy that underpins all reality is was argued by Isaac Newton, right? Thomas Aquinas, Augustus. They all argued that there is an underpinning, there's a singular energy that is all things, right? Like, that's what drives me crazy about secular scientists these days, is that they venerate Newton, but they ignore the fact that he was a theist, right? Who wrote tracts on theology. Like, he was a theologian. And now suddenly we're living in a world where, like Isaac Newton said, God is the collection of all things, a singular energy that underpins all of creation, right? And now here we have the secular quantum mechanicists saying there is a singular energy that underpins all reality. We've proven it mathematically. Like, those two things link. They link up, right? And this begins getting into really interesting questions, right? Like, I hate the question, does God exist? I've always hated it, because it always allows for semantic misunderstandings, which is essentially the entirety of the New Atheist movement, right? That the New Atheist movement was just one big semantic misunderstanding about what the definition of God was. And what I prefer is the question, okay, we know there's an energy, right? We've shown it mathematically. It's what the theologians were arguing the entire time, right? So the more interesting question is the energy sentient? Like, does the energy have a sentience? Is it intelligent? And once you start going down that logical rabbit hole, it doesn't take any leaps in logic to be like, well, it's got to be, right? Well, if I am sentient, and if you are sentient, and it is us and we are it, then it has to be as sentient as I am. Logically, it just has to be. It can't not be. If it is me and I am it has to be as sentient as I am. And it doesn't take a big leap of logic at all, or any leap of logic at all, to see that, like, oh, if this is the energy that is sustaining each and every one of us, and it's doing so collectively all at once, that it is likely as sentient or as intelligent as we all are together, right? And none of that is, like, I don't even consider that spiritual. Like, I don't consider this a big spiritual conversation. Like, I'm just following the math. And, like, and it raises really crazy, interesting questions about the nature of our existence, who we are, why do we believe the things we believe? Like, we put way more faith and trust in money, which we outright created, right? Which we outright created. We know we created it. We put more faith in money than we do in the literal energy that is sustaining our existence. Like, consciousness, bro. We are part of a larger consciousness that's broken us down into individual consciousnesses. Yeah. That's a way to say it. Yeah. Oh, it's a fascinating subject. I love to talk about it. I do. It's one of my favorite subjects. I don't really ever bring it up on the channel. Occasionally I do. But I do worry that I, like, alienate people. And I don't want to. Like, I don't want to. Like, everybody has their own sort of idea and their own sort of a thing. And I really do believe that a lot of the religious disagreements that are happening these days, especially between secularists and theists, I really, really do believe that most of them are semantic. Like, most of them are just a semantic misunderstanding about the conversation. Like, the new atheists are emblematic of that, right? Like, think about, like, the giant spaghetti monster, right? Like, the new atheists created this icon called the giant spaghetti monster that was a mockery of God, right? That, oh, well, God doesn't exist, or else the spaghetti monster exists, and all this. And it's like, okay, but, like, the giant spaghetti monster is a being that lives within creation itself, right? Like, that's what you've created. And only he's invisible or whatever, fine. But, like, that's literally not what's being talked about. So the giant spaghetti monster is a straw man of the actual conversation about what the theists are talking about with God. And this was pointed out cleanest in the conversation between Rowan Atkinson, then the Archbishop of Canterbury of the Anglican Church, and who's the leader of the Anglican Church, and Richard Dawkins. Right? That and within that conversation, this semantic misunderstanding was explicitly stated. And Dawkins didn't really have anything to say about it. Like, because he doesn't actually read or understand the subject. And that's the thing that annoys me the most about these new atheists, is that they are illiterate. Like, they don't actually know the subject. They don't understand the subject. And when they're confronted with their illiteracy, their defense is that it's okay to be illiterate on the subject because the subject itself is so silly. And it's like, but you're only affirming the silliness of the subject based on your illiteracy of the subject. Right? So it's a circle, it's a cyclical justification. And all of the new atheists, including the new atheist that I respect the most, which is Dennett. And the reason why I respect Dennett the most is because he wasn't a racist Islamophobe the way that Harris and Dawkins and Hitchens all were. Right? He actually was just like, no, I don't believe in God because here are my truths and all this kind of stuff. And of course I disagree with Dennett, but he never fell into that like Islamophobic, like he wasn't like Harris arguing in favor of torture, right? And like, and it's probably like Dennett and then Hitchens and then Dawkins and then Harris in regards to how much respectability those guys have. Because Hitchens at least, like, he would at least put his skin in the game, you know? Like, I gained a lot of respect for Hitchens when there was a big conversation going on in the nation about whether or not waterboarding should be considered torture. And Hitchens was like, he said outright, no, waterboarding isn't torture. Waterboarding's not torture. And so someone challenged him, well, then go get waterboarded. And Hitchens went, okay, it's not torture, fuck you, I'll go get waterboarded. And he went and filmed and released him being waterboarded. He was waterboarded for literally 5 seconds before begging for it to stop, and then published an article saying, I was wrong, waterboarding is torture. Commendable. Absolutely commendable. The hardest thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves and admit that they were wrong. That's the hardest thing for a person to do. And for Hitchens to take a bold stand, to be challenged on it and capitulate, admit that he was wrong, shows a real quality of character. Shows a real quality of character. That is commendable. And you can critique Hitchens for lots of things. There's lots of things, but the strength of his character was really shown in that moment, I think. Like, just the fact that he was willing to do it, you know? Like, that puts him heads and shoulders above a lot of people in the conversation. Mocked, how you doing, bud? It was a 7. It was a 7, bud. Feel good. Feel good. Feel good. Coming in late today, bud. Merry Christmas to you, bud. Merry Christmas to all of you. Yeah, if you guys want me to talk more about this subject, right? The nature of reality, the quantum energy, all that kind of stuff, just bring it up early. Bring it up early. I'll spend the entire fucking time talking about it. Because, like, I love to talk about it. I love to talk about it. My own background of fundamentalist Christianity has kind of informed a lot of my perception on this stuff. And then as that fundamentalism has broken away, I've never lost an interest in Christian theology from the secular perspective. I think the smartest thing I ever did was I said to myself, we should read the Bible and the works of like Augustus and Aquinas and Newton and all these guys. We should read them the same way that we read Shakespeare. That they are historical and important documents that still have a lot of importance and inform us of a lot of things about what it is to be a human being. And I strongly suggest to everybody, right? Why are we capitulating these documents to the worst elements in the society? Like, we literally say that, like, oh yeah, the far Christian right, they have the Bible. It's like, no, they don't. The Bible exists for all of us, and everybody should read it. Everybody should read the Bible. I actually go so far to say that if you only read one of the Gospels, you would be able to see how fraudulent these people are immediately. Like, I go so far to say that. And here, I'll even do a rundown for you to entice you even further. If Matthew was written by a tax collector who was writing a diary. Some of Christ's best lectures were given in Matthew, right? He was just literally like writing down the day's events. Mark is a series of campfire stories told to a scribe by the name of Mark from the leader of the church, Peter, who was an illiterate fisherman, which is why Peter didn't write any of this stuff down. He tells it as stories, as campfire stories, quite literally, to the scribe Mark. Luke is widely considered to be the best telling of the story of Christ because it was a historian who went into the region and gathered all of the information about the event and about the story and compiled it into one place. And so it's the most thorough and well informed version of the story, but it's a bit clinical, right? Because it's a historian who's been commissioned in order to tell the story. And then John was written by the Apostle John, who is, quote unquote, the apostle Jesus loved. And so it creates a more human story, and you end up with a more human version of who Jesus was. So there you go. Whichever one of those sounds like the most interesting to you, pick a gospel, read it, realize how fraudulent every Christian is. No exceptions. If you are walking around today proclaiming that you are a Christian in Western society, you are a fraud. Completely. No exceptions. Because you're not following Christ. Like, read one gospel, you'll realize you're not following Christ. It's real easy to see. It's like right there. You really got to work to miss it. Anyway, with that said, always remember, guys, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to ensure that you never realize it. Because you might realize that you're actually as valid as they are. And if you think that way, you're probably a lot harder to enslave. Don't let them. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Merry Christmas, guys. Good luck. We're going to need it.